Chapter 551. Boom! The explosion swept over from Godatzi's direction, and the resulting hurricane lifted a layer of skin from the surrounding ground. Nay, Achilles' 3 immortal horses were blown by the hurricane and let out a difficult cry. The 3 immortal horses held on for a moment, then dragged the empty chariot and was blown into the sky by the hurricane. Of course, it was not that Achilles and the others were blown away by the wind, but because Achilles and the others got off the chariot before it was blown away. Achilles and Rama lay on the ground, while Sharon held the unconscious blonde girl and hid behind Achilles and Rama. Wuming stood in front of Attila, blocking the hurricane for Attila, and looked at the strange light circle in the sky where the light beam had just been shot. There was no doubt that the explosion and hurricane were caused by the light beam attack. It really is that guy. This is exactly the same as Floro's light beam attack. The guy Wuming was talking about was the Magic King. After all, only that guy could set up a huge light circle in the sky of a singularity and launch such a powerful attack. Floro said that he had obtained the power of the king, and the black light beam shot by the dark light ball gave Wuming the same feeling as the light beam that fell from the sky just now. While Wuming was thinking, in just a few seconds, the hurricane stopped. Wuming shook the dust off his body and looked at Attila. "Are you okay?" Attila, who was not stained by a trace of dust, shook her head in the face of Wuming's concern. "I can do it myself," Attila said coldly. Attila in her servant form was a cold warrior form, which could also be understood as the 3 nothingness. Wuming understood what Attila meant. She was the clone of the giant god Attila, and was not so weak. Even without Wuming, she would not be affected by the hurricane. That being said, I think I did the right thing in protecting my friends. Wuming smiled, then turned away from Attila and walked towards Karo and the others. Attila stared blankly for a moment, as if attracted by Wuming's words. But in an instant, Attila regained her cold and emotionless appearance. However, Attila's gaze remained fixed on Wuming. Wuming walked over to Sharon and helped him up. At the same time, he picked up the golden-haired girl and the Holy Grail. I can only say that he is worthy of being called the Great Sage. Wuming's meaning was simple. Sharon could have given up on the girl and let her be blown away by the hurricane. You think too highly of me. I'm only here for the Holy Grail. Sharon shook his head with a smile. Although that was what he said, he could have taken the Holy Grail away and only protected it. Instead, he chose to protect the girl as well. No matter what, the result will not change. Wuming then looked at Achilles. Achilles, can you summon your chariot back? Of course not. Achilles said unhappily. Of course, Achilles was not unhappy with Wuming, but with the sudden attack. After that, Achilles whistled, and the chariot pulled by the 3 immortal gods flew over from the horizon. Wuming put the girl and the Holy Grail on the chariot and flew up. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, I'll go check the situation first. You guys go with Attila. After that, Wuming sped up and flew in the direction of Godatzi. Then, Achilles and Sharon got on the chariot. Miss Attila, please come up. Sharon said carefully. Attila did not say anything. She nimbly got on the chariot without any hesitation. However, the owner of the chariot, Achilles, looked at Attila full of fighting spirit. He was very interested in this servant who could make him feel pressure. He glared at Achilles, warning him not to cause trouble, and then looked at Rama. King Rama, what's wrong with you? The reason why Sharon asked this was because Rama was in a daze. Rama came back to his senses and looked at Sharon. Nothing, just a bad premonition suddenly appeared in my heart, as if something is going to happen to Sito. Then Rama shook his head, no longer thinking about the messy things, and got on the chariot. In this way, Achilles reluctantly pulled the 5 servants and began to move in the direction of Wuming. On Wuming's side, because Wuming used magic to assist his mental power to speed up, and the distance between Wuming and Godatzi was not far, so in the blink of an eye, Wuming arrived at the original gathering place of Gadotsi and the servants. At this moment, there was nothing left of what was originally a plain. The grass disappeared, the stones were annihilated, the trees were shattered, and there was no trace of it. It could only be judged by the magic of the earth that this used to be a good fertile land. However, the earth's experience was not good. The earth was directly lifted, revealing a barren yellow color. It could be said that there was nothing but barren land here now. But Wuming did not want this to be the case. As if God was on Wuming's side, in the barren land, Wuming saw a different place from the surrounding. The holy round shield appeared in a place similar to a mound, and then, the round shield peeled off the earth, and two figures walked out. Tachika. Matthew. Wuming quickly flew over. Is it assassin? Cough cough cough. Tachika was excited, then she ate a mouthful of dust and coughed. Senpai, are you okay? Matthew helped Gadotsi out of the mound and to the clean flat ground next to it. This made Gadotsi, who had been coughing, feel much better. Cough cough. I'm really choking to death. Gadotsi had an uncomfortable look on his face. After seeing how lively Gadotsi was, Wuming was no longer worried, and asked about the other servants. It's good that you're okay, what about the others? When Wuming asked, Gadotsi and Matthew both looked sad. Is that so? I understand. Wuming nodded. That was an unnecessary question. Under such an attack, the others might have returned to the martyr's palace. It could be said that they were almost wiped out. In the end, if Matthew didn't react and condensed his noble artifact into a point to protect me, I'm afraid I would have. Gadotsi did not continue. So that was the case. Wuming pondered. I'm sorry, Senpai Sarand, I really didn't have the confidence to block that attack, so I could only choose to protect Senpai. Matthew lowered his head in guilt. Then, Wuming put his hand on Matthew's head. Don't worry, I think they're thinking the same thing. Compared to protecting their dead servants, it's more important to make sure that Tachika is safe. What Wuming said was right. When the beam of light was about to hit, all the servants used their strongest noble phantoms to delay the beam of light so that Mashu could use her noble phantoms to protect Gadotsi. It's okay, Matthew, don't blame yourself. Gadotsi hugged Matthew and comforted him. Senpai, it's very dirty. What Mashu meant was that her body was covered with dust and she looked like a refugee from a slum. It's okay, I like Matthew the most, this is nothing. Gadotsi rubbed her face against Matthew. Senpai. Matthew's face instantly turned red. Although I'm sorry to disturb you, I want to say that the crisis may not be over yet. Wuming pointed to the light circle in the sky. Chapter 552. Gadotsi and Matthew both followed Wuming's finger and looked at the sky. The strange huge circle was like a circular lamp that was pressed on the huge ceiling in the sky, giving people a very mysterious feeling. Hey! What is that? Gadotsi was obviously shocked. It's never happened before. Matthew also widened his eyes and looked at the huge circle in the sky. Like Gadotsi and Matthew, Wuming also stared at the sky. Then, Wuming said his guess. If I'm not wrong, it's probably the Magic King's noble phantasm. Hey! Gadotsi and Matthew were both shocked. After all, I don't think anyone else can release that level of attack over the singularity except for that guy. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, it seemed that this was the only possibility. I guess, I'm afraid that every singularity has this circle, but the circle was hidden by that guy. It could be said that Wuming had not been to the previous singularities, and the only one he had been to was Winterwood City. When he was in Winterwood City, Wuming noticed that the sky was slightly different, but he didn't pay much attention to it. When he was in London, because he was underground, he couldn't see the sky, so Wuming didn't pay attention to it. At this singularity, Wuming noticed the abnormality in the sky. Deliberately hiding it made people notice the abnormality. "That guy's move is bad," Wu Ming ridiculed mercilessly. But even so, the other party didn't suffer any losses. The price of exposing this noble phantasm was that almost all the servants were sent back to the Valhalla. Nightingale, Geronimo, Atlanta, Edison, Tamamonome, Billy Boy, Robin Hood, Elizabeth, Kyoheim, Helena. It could be said that the attack just now had killed those 10 servants. At present, the American continent, which had more than 30 servants in the beginning, was now left with only a dozen servants. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and the unconscious Roman girl escaped the attack because they were with Wu Ming. Because of the duel, Arjona and Karna were located in the northwestern part of the American continent. He reckoned that Aeson and Demetrius, as well as Hercules, who had Wu Ming filling up the lake, should not have been affected. Maeve and Ceto were sent away by Wu Ming using the portal. Gadotzi's personal servant, Matthew Gillett, and Wu Ming, who was currently with Gadotzi. Finally, there was Pamilia, who was sleeping in Riverton. Speaking of this, Wu Ming was quite helpless and angry. According to Gadotzi, Pamilia said that she would take a nap when it was time for her to sleep. Knowing that their team's mission was only to delay the Romans, Pamilia said that she would take a nap first. Then, there was no then. The vampire was still in Riverton, at least Wu Ming could be sure that she was not here. But there was no other way. Who would have thought that a simple delay would trigger the appearance of the demon god pillar? If Pamilia was here before, even if Floros got the power of the Magic King, Wu Ming estimated that Pamilia would be able to kill Floros if he used his trump card. After all, even if a child was armed with a machete, he would not be able to fight an unarmed Special Forces soldier. No longer thinking about this matter, Wu Ming began to think about the remaining servants. In addition to Wu Ming himself, there were a total of 14 servants left. Not to mention the strength of the remaining servants, it could be said that if it was an ordinary Holy Grail war, the 14 servants except for Wu Ming could be said to be enough. However, with only 14 servants, in this American continent, where the magic power had been raised to the level of a god, it was not enough. Not to mention, there was a guy like Aeson, who was useless and only knew how to drive a boat. It could be said that if the halo in the sky did not hide anymore, except for Wu Ming, the rest of the servants would probably have to leave. Although Matthew could block the attack just now, it did not mean that Matthew could block the rest of the attack. Matthew could block it once, it was already very good. After all, Matthew was still not a mature servant. At present, Matthew was still unable to use Galahad's noble phantasm. Otherwise, there would not be a situation where Matthew could only protect Gadotzi alone. Besides, not everyone would choose to stand on Gadotzi's side. At present, only 7 servants, Wu Ming, Matthew, Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and Maeve, could serve as the combat power to protect Gadotzi. Pamilia's whereabouts were unknown. Maybe she had woken up, or maybe she was still sleeping. The Roman girl rescued from the demon god pillar had been in a coma, and she could not leave the Holy Grail. She could only rely on the Holy Grail to maintain the integrity of her spiritual base. She could not stay too close to Rama, and even if she woke up, with her broken spiritual base, she would not have much combat power. As for Arzu and Karna, Karna wanted to come back to help Gadotzi, but Arzu was unwilling. It could be said that if Karna chose to help Gadotzi, then Arzu would definitely choose to help the Magus King. In this way, he would be able to fulfill his wish and become enemies with Karna again. Karna, who could not get away, could only accompany Arzu as a sacrifice. Hercules probably had not broken free from the bottom of the lake yet. After all, there were so many fake heavenly locks that were no different from the real heavenly locks. Even Hercules would have to spend a little effort to break them. Of course, unless Wu Ming personally helped him break them. Aeson and Demetrius would definitely follow Aeson, and with Aeson's character, Wu Ming didn't expect him to do anything. It could be said that as long as he did not cause trouble, he would be thankful. At this moment, Maeve was not here. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, and Attila were still rushing here. At present, only Wu Ming and Matthew could protect Gadotsi. After thinking for a while, Wu Ming waved to Gadotsi. "Gadotsi, come here." Although Gadotsi was puzzled, because of her trust in Wu Ming, she did not hesitate to walk over. "Give me your hand." After saying that, Wu Ming stretched out his hand and held Gadotsi's slender little hand. "Hey, what are you doing, assassin?" Gadotsi did not care about shaking hands with Wu Ming, but Gadotsi did not understand what Wu Ming wanted to do, and Matthew was the same. Could it be that this was a farewell before death? "Just kidding. I'm just giving you my strongest defense. Relax." Then, Wu Ming did not pay attention to Gadotsi and Matthew. Holding Gadotsi's hand, Wu Ming closed his eyes. Then, a beautiful scene appeared in front of Matthew's eyes. The holy and invincible armor on Wu Ming's body, under the effect of Wu Ming's magic, emitted a dazzling brilliance. Then, the armor automatically disintegrated, and then in a series of light, the armor compressed and transformed into a set of armor similar to that of a woman's. Finally, the armor attached to Gadotsi's body, under the shocked expression on Gadotsi's face, forming a slender and beautiful set of white close-fitting armor for a young girl. This made Gadotsi, who still had her hand in Wu Ming's hand, stunned. Then, an earth-shattering scream resounded through the sky. Ah! Chapter 553. Wah! Wah! What? What is this? A person who was wrapped in close-fitting female armor and wearing an elegant dragon-crowned helmet shouted in excitement and surprise. This person was none other than Gadotsi, who was wearing Wu Ming's armor. "Say, Senior, are you okay?" Matthew stood beside Gadotsi at a loss and asked cautiously. "I'm fine, I'm just shocked to put on assassin's armor." Gadotsi's voice came from the seemingly thin but actually heavy armor. Fortunately, Wu Ming adjusted the armor and added a lot of adjustment tactics. The specific effect was that Gadotsi, a modern girl without the strength to truss a chicken, could wear such a compressed and heavy armor without changing the quality and defense. After that, Wu Ming smiled helplessly as he looked at Gadotsi, who was uncomfortable talking to Matthew because of the helmet. "Relax, inject magic, the armor will respond to you." Although Gadotsi was a novice with no experience in magic, after so long, under the guidance of Roman, Olga Marie, and Gadotsi, she could still do the ordinary extraction and application of magic. With that said, as if demonstrating, Wu Ming put his hand on Gadotsi, and then the helmet on Gadotsi's head split and attached to her shoulders and back. "Hey! So simple." Gadotsi was interested, and she used magic with her small face. In an instant, the helmet that was disassembled closed again and wrapped Gadotsi's small head. Although Wu Ming wanted to complain about Gadotsi's constipated expression just now. Then, Gadotsi controlled the helmet to disassemble again, and her excited little head was exposed again. "It's really amazing," then, Matthew poked Gadotsi. "Senior, now is not the time to play." In an instant, Gadotsi's small face became awkward. Right, assassin, you gave me the armor, what will you do?" Gadotsi saw before that the cover that trapped the demon god pillar was made of Wu Ming's armor. And Gadotsi also saw that the defense wall was not damaged at all under the powerful attacks of Wu Ming and the demon god pillar. This armor was undoubtedly a super powerful noble artifact. "If you don't have this armor, what will you do when the light circle attacks again?" Gadotsi said worriedly. Indeed, Wu Ming, the Berserker Holy King Sealan's strongest noble artifact was this set of armor. With an invincible defense and a light spear that could be strengthened, Wu Ming could be said to be invincible. Of course, this invincibility only meant that Wu Ming would not be defeated. It did not mean that he was truly invincible. If demon god Shuden could use the Holy Grail and the blessing of the sun god to release the power of the sun because Wuming thought it was troublesome, then facing the demon god pillar Floros not long ago, Wuming really had no way to kill it with the body of a servant. Although it seemed that Floros was no different from the other demon god pillars, Floros said that it had obtained the power of its king. Naturally, it could not be compared to the other demon god pillars. However, it was precisely because of this that Wuming borrowed Rama's noble artifact. It's because I'm afraid that the light circle will attack again, so I let you wear this noble artifact. Wuming gently touched Gadotsi's little head and messed up her hair. If it's me, I have it. Wuming turned his head. Following the direction where Wuming turned his head, Gadotsi saw a holy sword that was similar to the Excalibur floating beside Wuming. As if responding to Wuming's words, the divine blade of salvation shone with holy light and attracted lightning. You should know that the best defense is offense. With the divine blade of salvation, nothing will happen to me. But if you don't have this set of armor, it's very likely that something will happen to you. Wuming tried to reason with Gudazi. So, be obedient, Tachika. In the end, Wuming ended with a pampering tone. I know. Gadotsi's cheeks blushed. No matter how good their relationship was, after experiencing such gentle flirting, as a girl who has never been in a relationship before, it was quite fatal. Even Mashu, who was next to him, was blushing like a braised crab. Wuming nodded with satisfaction. Sharon and the others will be here soon. You two remember not to run around. Gadotsi and Matthew nodded. Then, I'll leave for a moment. With that, a dark purple ripple swallowed Wuming, and then the ripple disappeared. Hey! Hey! Can you hear me? At this time, Gadotsi's wristband sounded. Leader. Is the communication device fixed? Gadotsi asked in surprise. However, in response to Gadotsi's inquiry, only the voice was heard, and not the image. But the voice was no longer Olga Marie's voice, but Roman's. How could it be fixed? That's magic power comparable to hundreds of holy swords. The explosive magic power directly blew up Chaldea's device. Da Vinci's really tired this time. However, before Roman could finish complaining, Olga Marie's voice was heard again. Get out of my way. After Olga Marie's roar, there was the sound of someone falling to the ground. Then, Olga Marie's calm voice was heard. Speaking of which, under the attack just now, besides you, who else survived? Yes, Assassin is fine. Achilles, Sharon, and Rama, who were with Assassin, are also fine. The attack just now seemed to be directed at us, or rather, it was directed at Senpai, Mashu explained to Olgamai. Is that so? Gadotsi heard Olga Marie's voice and was a little confused. Why did it sound like she was relieved? In fact, Olga Marie wanted to ask for Wuming's comfort, but after all, she was at Sundra, so it was unlikely that she would ask directly. Ahem. In short, Chaldea can only perform simple communication and race shift for now. It's too dangerous for Tachika and Matthew to continue staying there. Haven't all the enemies been defeated? Let's use race shift to come back first. This made Gadotsi and Matthew shocked. After all, Gadotsi and Matthew's mission was to repair the singularity. It could be said that the two completely completed the mission in the past few singularities before returning to Chaldea. But this time, Olga Marie proposed to temporarily return to Chaldea. Haven't all the Holy Grails in this singularity been collected? As long as the Holy Grail is taken away from this singularity, it will repair itself. Then, Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. That. Director, have you forgotten? All the recovered Holy Grails are temporarily in Assassin's hands. Matthew also added a fatal blow. And, the Celtic Holy Grail is not in the hands of the Senior Cylinder, it seems to be in the hands of Queen Maeve. In other words, you've been busy in this singularity for half a day, and you haven't gotten a single holy grail." Olga Marie's tone was a little strange. "Although I'm sorry," Matthew said. "But it's true," Gadotsi said. Then, the device on Gadotsi's wrist dimmed, which meant that the other party had cut off the communication. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other and smiled helplessly. Chapter 554. A moment later, Gadotsi's bracelet lit up again, but this time, the contact was no longer Olga Marie, but Dr. Roman. Roman said that Director Olga Marie was muttering, "How come we didn't get a single Holy Grail? That guy is an idiot, we could have just given the Holy Grail to Chaldea." He cursed as he left the control room. He seemed to have returned to his own room. "Will the director be okay?" Gadotsi asked worriedly. "Don't worry, the director isn't as weak as you think. She's still very strong." Romo's calm and amiable voice was heard. On this point, Roman could be said to have the most right to speak. After all, when Olga Marie became the director, Roman had already been in Chaldea for a long time. It could even be said that Roman was Olga Marie's senior in a sense. For the time being, Gadotsi and Matthew began to think about what to do next. "Then, Doctor, what should we do next?" Matthew asked. This question made Roman silent. At present, the 3 Holy Grails were already in the hands of Wu Ming, and the Celtic Holy Grail was also in the hands of Maeve. It could be said that as long as Wu Ming went to see Maeve, brought the Holy Grail back, and gave it to Gadotsi, then everything would be solved. So, at present, it seemed that the only thing to do was to wait. In the control room, Roman helplessly scratched his head, and then said to Gadotsi on the other side, "Well, let's meet up with Sharon first, then think about what to do next." Roman said weakly. "Okay, Doctor." Then, Gadotsi and Matthew closed the communication, and began to walk in the direction where Sharon and the others left to meet up with them. In the control room, the remaining staff members were working nervously. Only now could Roman breathe a sigh of relief. Roman sat down on the chair behind him and leaned back slightly. Magic Kings. Noble artifact. The 5th singularity, the American continent, Washington's White House. When Wu Ming sent Sito and Maeve away using the portal, he had set this place as his destination. After all, this was their base camp. It was much safer than other places. However, in the end, Wu Ming still miscalculated. Dark purple ripples appeared, and Wu Ming jumped out of the ripples. Wu Ming stood firmly on the ground, but what welcomed him was an incomparably huge tentacle. Dong! In an instant, the tentacle slammed heavily on the ground, and the ground caved in because of the huge impact of the tentacle. Immediately afterward, the saber light with lightning struck the tentacle, instantly cutting it off. Wu Ming stood beside the severed tentacle and brandished his sword. Without a doubt, the tentacle did not hit Wu Ming. The moment the tentacle fell, Wu Ming dodged it. Wu Ming looked at the owner of the tentacle with a serious expression, a huge pillar of flesh that rose into the sky. Demon God Pillar Flawless, that's right, at this moment, in front of Wu Ming, on the White House Square in Washington, the same Demon God Pillar as Flawless stood there. Wu Ming had a guess. This Demon God Pillar Flawless was summoned from the Holy Grail held by Maeve. The evidence was Maeve, who was embedded in the flesh wall of the Demon God Pillar with only half of her body exposed. At this moment, Maeve's body was drooping, and she was obviously unconscious. As for Sito, who was already unconscious and brought back by Maeve, Wu Ming, who had already spread out his mental power, indicated that he did not find him. Wu Ming estimated that Sito was either swallowed by the Demon God Pillar and was in the body of the Demon God Pillar, or had been killed by the Demon God Pillar and returned to the Martyr's Palace. At this moment, Flawless, who failed the sneak attack, spoke. "You can really find this place, Dragon of Origin." It was still Lev's voice, and it was still an unpleasant voice. Demon God Pillars are all as disgusting as cockroaches. This is really an eye-opener. Wu Ming mocked mercilessly. Although Wu Ming also knew that to kill the demon god pillar, he had to kill all 72 of them at once, but he could resurrect immediately after dying together. This was a bit of a bug. Of course, an ordinary demon god pillar that appears at a singularity can't do it, but I have the king's blessing. Of course, such a thing can be done. As long as there was the Holy Grail and the sacrifice, Flawless could appear on his own. This was the reason why Flawless suddenly appeared in Alexandria, and the reason why he could resurrect in the White House after dying. But I didn't expect you to put the Holy Grail in the hands of this servant. I thought you had already put it away. But this is good. If not, I won't be able to appear again. Ha ha ha, the demon god pillar laughed and shook his body. Maeve, who was embedded in the body of the demon god pillar, also shook along with the demon god pillar. Then, Maeve was shaken awake. I am. Maeve, who had just woken up, was still not completely awake. She was a little confused about the current situation. Maeve, are you okay? Wu Ming immediately shouted at Maeve after seeing Maeve wake up. Wu Ming's shout woke Maeve up, but it also made Maeve quite unhappy. Really, little Sai, can't you pretend that you don't care about me? This way, this guy can threaten you. Maeve was like a young girl, looking at Wu Ming with a puffed-up face, expressing her dissatisfaction. Maeve and Sito were originally here, but for some reason, Maeve's Holy Grail had an abnormality. It directly used Maeve and Sito's body as a sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar. Because Sito's spiritual base was damaged, she was equivalent to half a servant, so Maeve acted as the other half and was embedded in the demon god pillar. Before her magic was absorbed, Maeve heard the voice of the demon god pillar. That was what Flawless said at that time. Ha ha ha. I'm back. Wait for your death, Wu Ming. Then Maeve fainted. Wu Ming told Maeve his real name. So, according to Maeve's own judgment, she knew one thing, that was, Flawless was Wu Ming's enemy. So Maeve originally wanted to pretend that she didn't know Wu Ming, in case Flawless threatened Wu Ming with her. But you directly called my name. Isn't this telling it that I'm very important to you? Although she was complaining, Maeve was smiling. That was joy. It was impossible for Wu Ming not to know this, but Wu Ming still called Maeve, exposing their relationship and giving Flawless an opportunity. Because Wu Ming was worried about Maeve, it was impossible for him to not recognize Maeve because of threats. Even if I did that, Flawless wouldn't be fooled. After all, Flawless had said before that since Wu Ming came to this singularity, Flawless had been monitoring Wu Ming. Perhaps Flawless already knew about the relationship between Wu Ming and Maeve, and revealing half of Maeve's body was probably premeditated. That's right. It's because I know about your relationship that I devoured the guy whose spiritual base was about to die and this woman. In this way, I can expose her outside and use it to threaten you, Dragon of Origin Wu Ming. Facing such a situation, Wu Ming's hand holding the divine blade of salvation couldn't help but tighten. Trouble. Chapter 555. Wu Ming, who was being threatened, did not dare to unleash the light cannon attack of the divine blade of salvation on Flawless because it would directly send Maeve and Flawless away. Therefore, Wu Ming could only suppress the power of the divine blade of salvation and deal with the demon god pillar with just a slash. Swish! A slash mixed with lightning and holy light instantly cut off many of the tentacles that were attacking him. Even the body of the demon god pillar was slashed by the flash of the blade. However, the self-healing ability of the demon god pillar that had obtained greater power was even more powerful. In just a few seconds, the cracked body healed and the tentacles grew out. However, it could be seen that even if the power was deliberately suppressed, the divine blade of salvation was still the divine blade of salvation. The holy sword that could split a star was not just for show. It could be said that the divine blade of salvation could not only be classified as a divine blade of salvation, but also as a divine blade of salvation. Such a powerful divine weapon, even if the power was suppressed, was still not something that the demon god pillar could resist. Originally, it should have been like that. However, because Flawless had obtained the power of their king, his strength had also increased by a level. This created a very awkward situation. Flawless could not hurt Wuming, and Wuming could not do anything to the demon god pillar even if he showed mercy. For example, the original divine blade of salvation that Wuming used had a strength of 100. Currently, the divine blade of salvation that was transformed from the Holy Grail and Rama's divine blade of salvation had a strength of 80. Due to the deliberate suppression, the strength was reduced to 50. The original strength of the demon god pillar, Flawless, was 30. After obtaining the power of the Magic King, the strength became 50. In this way, the two of them were equal. However, the pure data was only used as a general reference. It could not accurately express anything. It only meant that the two of them were unable to defeat each other. As expected, even after obtaining the power of our king, it is still too weak when facing the dragon of origin, Flawless said calmly. Indeed, as the king of Flawless had said, there was nothing to be afraid of with an immature dragon of origin. Even though Wuming was very powerful in the eyes of many people, he paled in comparison to the Magic King who had obtained the power of the black soil. It was true that an adult origin dragon would possess unparalleled power. It could travel through time, move mountains and fill seas, reverse time, and even bring the dead back to life. However, the prerequisite was that Wuming had to stay inside the origin and use its power. That was because the root dragon was a unique creature that was neither human, beast, nor god that was born from the world root that gave birth to all worlds, which was why it had to borrow the power of the root to achieve invincibility. Although it was called the origin dragon and had the appearance of a dragon, the origin dragon wasn't actually a dragon. The reason Wuming had the characteristics and drawbacks of a dragon was because Wuming's birthplace had shifted from the great origin to the origin of the M-shaped moon. To put it simply, he was tainted with an impure bloodline. However, Wuming had already been baptized inside the Great Origin and had basically eliminated the drawbacks of dragons. It could be said that as long as Wuming continued to be baptized by the Great Origin, he would return to the purest form of the Origin Dragon. After that, as long as he went through the baptism of the Great Origin, an adult Origin Dragon could be said to be truly invincible. For now, as long as Wuming stayed inside the Great Origin, he would be invincible inside. For now, Wuming couldn't interfere with other worlds for the time being. Moreover, as long as Wuming left the Great Origin, Wuming's chances of losing against someone like the Magic King, who could be said to be a cheat, were definitely higher than his chances of winning against him. In other words, Wuming could only rely on his own power as a dragon of origin. He couldn't threaten anyone else at all. Whether it was Darius, Romo, Arthas, or even the Magic King, Wuming couldn't defeat any of them. However, Wuming himself knew this, which was why Wuming had resorted to using external objects. In the past, the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha, who had great wisdom, had also noticed this drawback of Wuming's. That was why she had let Wuming use the process of sublimation to obtain a noble artifact. The true strength of a servant wasn't their martial arts or anything else, but their noble artifacts, which were killer moves that could instantly turn the situation around. Not only that, but there were also many treasures that had rather miraculous functions, such as resurrecting the dead and reversing time, and so on. All in all, since one's body was weak, one should use powerful weapons. That was how humans had developed. There was no reason why a higher-level species like humans couldn't understand this principle. And that was what Wuming did. In the beginning, Wuming's sublimation was very difficult, and it required a lot of effort. Now that Wuming had the power of origin, it was no longer so strenuous for him. He could easily sublimate items or abilities into a noble artifact. However, Wuming would not casually turn a weapon into a noble artifact. After all, even if he really turned a stone into a noble artifact, it would be the lowest grade of grade E noble artifact. It wasn't that he couldn't upgrade it, but he didn't know how long it would take. Then, the ordinary stone would become a divine stone. Therefore, if possible, Wu-Ming would not simply obtain a noble artifact. In fact, Wu-Ming did not deliberately obtain a noble artifact. For example, the divine blade of salvation. That was the artifact that Wu-Ming obtained after defeating Rama, who was the last hope, and inheriting the identity of the last king through trickery. Even if the sword of salvation in Wu-Ming's hand was a weakened version of the holy sword, its power was not something that Flawless could block. As it had experienced this personally, Flawless did not completely devour Maeve to threaten Wu-Ming. However, Flawless knew that it would lose if it kept defending. Therefore, it was ready to make peace. Forget it, dragon of origin. My purpose is just to see Chaldea and the rest. In fact, I don't have the intention to fight you at all. Flawless' tentacles stopped dancing as if they were still in the air. The devil mist and the heat rays in its eyes dissipated. It seemed like it was really ready to make peace. As long as you promise not to interfere with the singularity anymore, I'll let this woman go and allow you to help Chaldea repair the singularity. What do you think? After hearing what Flawless said, Wu-Ming slowly lowered the sword of salvation. The lightning and holy light on the blade gradually disappeared. Then, Wu-Ming let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, Flawless, even though we've had a lot of dealings, you still don't know me well. Chapter 556. What do you mean? Flawless was confused. You care about her a lot, don't you? I just need you to stop interfering with the next singularity to save her. Isn't that a good deal? Flawless' voice was like a devil's as he continued to tempt Wu-Ming. Ha! Wu-Ming lowered his head and laughed. It was a mocking laugh. I won't say much nonsense. Let's put it simply. I can't compromise with you, Flawless. Wasn't that a given? For example, if someone stole something from you and made a deal with you, and it was a deal that wasn't beneficial to you, most people wouldn't agree to it. But, I'm threatening you, Lord Dragon of Origin, Flawless said with a smile. Although he couldn't see the smile on the giant meat pillar, Wu-Ming could feel that Flawless was smiling. Moreover, Flawless was right. Wu-Ming was being threatened by Flawless at that moment. If he couldn't get rid of this threat, Wu-Ming would always be controlled by others. Wu-Ming frowned and held the Savior Divine sword tightly. At that moment, Wu-Ming was quite upset. Ah, Xiao Sai, you don't have to be threatened by this guy for me. Do what you want to do. Maeve smiled and the command spell hidden under the white silk gloves disappeared. Feeling the magical power invading his body, Wu-Ming's heart skipped a beat. Maeve was using the command spell. Fortunately, Wu-Ming had the ability to resist the command spell. Traveler, A+, the effect was equivalent to a solo A+, and it could greatly resist the command spell of the master. Wu-Ming was able to withstand the power of the command incantation without any pressure. However, that was only the power of the command spell. If it were 2 strokes, it wouldn't be so easy. Xiao Sai, use your strongest attack relic on me with all your might. Bang! This was the sound of Wu-Ming's other hand suddenly landing on the sword of salvation. Wu-Ming held the Savior Divine sword with both hands and looked up at Maeve. Maeve! Don't do anything stupid. Flawless also realized that something was wrong. He quickly used his tentacles to wrap Maeve up and prevent her from meeting Wu-Ming. However, it was too late for Flawless. Finally, love me with all your might, my lover, surrender. Maeve smiled as she looked at Wu-Ming lovingly. The last command incantation was used by my Fu. At this moment, Wu-Ming and my Fu no longer had a master-slave relationship, but a pure relationship between a young girl and her lover. Afterwards, my Fu was wrapped up by the tentacles of the demon god pillar and fused into the demon god pillar. Wait a minute. Don't come over. Flawless shouted in fear. Excalibur. The third command spell allowed Wu-Ming to unleash his strongest attack. Boundless white holy light, mixed with sacred golden lightning, formed a cannon of light that was like a heavenly punishment, covering the White House. Facing Wu Ming's savior divine sword, Floros fell into silence and gave up struggling. It was not only because Floros knew that he could not block it, but also because he was thinking. Even Floros did not expect Maeve to be so determined to let her lover kill him. Perhaps this was the pride of being a hero and a heroic spirit. Then, Floros lost consciousness. After the white light, the White House no longer existed. North of Washington, north of the Appalachian Mountains, there was a huge gully that connected to the Arctic Ocean. Endless seawater poured in as if it was reflecting someone's anger. The holy light and lightning were still rippling in the seawater. Wu Ming's attack directly cut the continent in half. The energy impact of the Savior Divine Sword was not something that could be blocked by a singularity. After all, the power to split a star was not fake. If it weren't for Wu Ming releasing his own attack and weakening the command spell's effect, perhaps the entire singularity would be shattered in the end. With his eyes closed, Wu Ming took a long breath. Although the servants were the avatars of the heroic spirits, it was still a bit uncomfortable for Wu Ming to kill the lover he had just accepted. Wu Ming had never treated the lives of the servants as lives. This was the same as Gadotsi and Matthew. They would not ignore the life and death of the singularity residents, even if Gadotsi knew that they would be repaired by history. Although this was a lie, it could be seen that Gadotsi and Matthew's hearts were noble. No, it should be said that that was what humans should be. At least, Wu Ming believed that this was what a human was, a real human. Although Wu Ming was not a human, it did not prevent Wu Ming from having the precious character of a human. Maeve. Wu Ming said Maeve's name with a little sadness. From this, it could be seen how deep Maeve's love for Wu Ming was. Without hesitation, she used the command spell to force Wu Ming to kill her along with the demon god Pillar. Even if she was just an avatar, who would want to be killed by the person she loved? This courage, this persistence, this dedication, completely explained that even if Maeve was in the ranks of the anti-hero, she also had the pride of a hero. Then, let's meet again in the future, my Fu. Wu Ming said softly to the original demon god Pillar, as if he was whispering to it. Then, Wu Ming walked over. As the sacrifice to summon the demon god Pillar, the servant had an advantage, that was, no matter how powerful the demon god Pillar was, how fierce the attack was, the servant as the sacrifice would always be safe. However, after the demon god Pillar disappeared, the servant as the sacrifice would withdraw in a short time as if their spiritual base and magic power had been drained. This was the case with G of Justice, and the blonde Roman girl, because of the protection of the Holy Grail, did not directly withdraw. So this time, the servant as the sacrifice of the demon god Pillar would be the same. It would definitely withdraw in a very short time. Wu Ming walked to Sito's side. Sito's spiritual base was about to be broken, and at this moment, his body was already faintly discernible. It could be said that at this moment, if not for the protection of the cultic Holy Grail that fell after Floros withdrew, Sito would have already left. As far as the current situation was concerned, once the Holy Grail left Sito, Sito would immediately disappear. Now, the Holy Grail was just hanging on to Sito's last breath. However, fortunately, there was the Holy Grail hanging on to Sito's last breath. In this way, Wu Ming was confident that he could save Sito. Wu Ming suddenly had a guess. Let's give it a try. With that, Wu Ming took out another Greek Holy Grail that he obtained from Ison in his protective shell space, and together with the cultic Holy Grail, he placed it on Sito's body that was about to dissipate. The light of the Greek Holy Grail appeared and began to cooperate with the cultic Holy Grail to nourish Sito's spiritual base. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming stretched out his two hands, placed them on the two Holy Grails, and began to inject magic power into the Holy Grail. At this moment, the halo in the sky changed, and a beam of light fell, in the direction of. Where is Tachika and the others? Chapter 557. In just an instant, the light beam shot by the aperture landed near Alexandria. That direction was definitely the direction of Gadotsi and the others. Wu Ming was willing to bet. However, Wu Ming did not do anything else and continued to infuse magic into the two holy grails. Fortunately, Wu Ming was cautious and had already given the invincible armor that was comparable to Avalon's time to Gadotsi. Therefore, Wu Ming was not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others. Why was he not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others? That was because Wu Ming had already infused a lot of magic into his precious armor in advance. In the face of danger, it would automatically decompose and form a protective shield. Dong! Ignoring the explosion behind him that was even more intense than the light beam shot by the aperture, Wu Ming focused on healing Sido. The miraculous power of the two holy grails and Wu Ming's almost infinite magic was like a good car with good fuel. The effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. After a while, Sido slowly opened her eyes. You are. Sido looked at the young man who was filled with holy light in front of her in confusion. I'm Rama's friend. I was asked by Rama to come and save you. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Sido was asked by Rama to come. This was not a lie, but it was not true either. It could be considered half true and half false. After all, Wu Ming would not be stingy with his power if he could help this couple improve their relationship. Thank you. Although Sido was still weak, she still chose to believe in Wu Ming. Wu Ming's eyes told Sido that he was not lying to her. Moreover, feeling her spiritual base gradually recovering, Sido also believed that Wu Ming was here to save her. Miss Sido, may I ask what your last memory is? I need to know how long you were unconscious. While her body was being healed by the Holy Grail, Sido recalled for a while and then answered Wu Ming. I remember that my last memory was talking to that unbelievably beautiful big sister, talking to her about her lover. Sido's face gradually turned red as she talked about her girlish thoughts. The lover that Miss Sido was talking about is Rama, right? Wu Ming said softly. Yes. Sido's voice became softer. He was obviously embarrassed. You two are so loving. I'm so envious. The more Wu Ming spoke, the redder Sido's face became. Wu Ming even suspected that when Sido's face became red to a certain extent, his blood vessels would burst or something. No longer teasing Sido, Wu Ming asked a serious question. Then, who is the lover that the beautiful woman was talking to you about? It was not that Wu Ming suspected my Fu. He knew that my Fu must be talking about him. Therefore, Wu Ming wanted to know how my Fu talked about him and how she loved him. That beautiful big sister my Fu, she told me that her lover was a hero that did not lose to Lord Rama. Wu Ming could not help but smile helplessly. This my Fu actually called Sido her sister. He saved me when I needed him. After saving the damsel in distress, he did not want to take responsibility. His temperament was volatile and he could not stay in the same place. However, he was willing to start a war for me. He did not fall for my beauty, but he was able to treat me like family. He was clearly moved, but he still held it in, and in the end, he really left. Sido muttered the words that my Fu said when she talked to her. I was so perfect, there were so many men pursuing me, and all of them fell at my feet, but he didn't move at all. I even fell deeply in love with him. It may sound funny, but I still kept my first time for him. Hearing this sentence, Wu Ming was stunned. In his mind, he could not help but think of my Fu's sly and slightly blushing face. Although Wu Ming had guessed it, but in front of such a sentence, Wu Ming could not help but be surprised. Wu Ming knew about Queen Mai Fu's promiscuous love before he came to this world. Wu Ming guessed that my Fu in this world should also be like that. However, because Wu Ming met my Fu when she just came out of her ivory tower, and until my Fu died after Wu Ming left, Wu Ming did not see my Fu having intimate contact with any man except himself. In other words, my Fu was indeed a pure girl. Nature would be suppressed by a stronger desire, and Wu Ming was my Fu's stronger desire. Not noticing Wu Ming's abnormality, Sito continued. However, I'm really happy that he was able to accompany me for such a long time. Even if he left and I was attacked by death, I still love him. I hope that he can accept me and not leave me to travel alone. From the looks of it, my years of strategy have finally paid off. Sito's cheeks blushed. It seemed that imitating my Fu's tone was a great test for her. After hearing this sentence, Wu Ming smiled helplessly and satisfactorily. Wu Ming suspected that my Fu deliberately let Sito say these words to him. However, my Fu did not lie, and this was what Wu Ming was satisfied with. Although Wu Ming did not stop the movement of transferring magic power, he did not speak and quietly waited for Sito to continue. However, Sito did not continue and changed the topic. That Lord Saran, the person Sister Mai Fu was talking about is you, right? Wu Ming didn't say his name, so for Sito to know, it was most likely Maeve who told Sito Wu Ming's name. She also told Sito about her lover, Wu Ming, in this singularity, and even his appearance. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and then asked Sito. Since you know that I'm Saran, you must also know that my Fu and I are the leaders of the forces that captured you. Don't you hate us? After all, everyone makes mistakes, and now it was you and Sister Mai Fu who saved me from being used as a sacrifice by the Greek forces. Although Sito was still used as a sacrifice by Floros, well, take this as my apology to you. Wu Ming nodded and did not persist on this point. That, Lord Saran, Sister Mai Fu also asked me to tell you something. Wu Ming looked at Sito in confusion. Then, Sito spoke. Sister Mai Fu said that she will wait for you at the Martyr's Palace, no matter how long it takes. After that, Wu Ming was stunned. Then, Wu Ming nodded. I've received the message. Thank you, Miss Sito. That, you don't have to use honorifics, just call me Sito. After all, Lord Saran and Lord Rama are good friends, Wu Ming nodded. Speaking of which, you and Rama are really in love, no wonder he asked me to save you. Then, Sito went silent for a few seconds. There's no such thing, I'm sorry, Lord Rama. Sito's voice was extremely soft. If it were not for Wu Ming's good hearing, he might not have heard Sito's words. Actually, Rama is the same as you. Ha! Sito widened her eyes. One night, Rama was worried about you and had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He told me that he was sorry. Of course, it was a lie. Rama did not have a heart-to-heart talk with Wu Ming, but Wu Ming, who understood Rama's heart, could naturally infer Rama's love for Sito. In order to let Sito prove his innocence, Rama forced Sito to commit suicide, which made Rama feel guilty. It was also because of this that Rama appeared in the form of a young king. According to Rama's words, it was, only at this time, I was the Rama who would do anything for Sito. I was the husband that Sito needed, the Rama who loved her deeply. He repeated the words of Rama to Siddhartha. As a result, Siddhartha, whose face was originally flushed red, began to shed tears. Lord Rama. Sito murmured softly. Then, Sito looked at Wu Ming. Lord Sarander, please agree to my request. Help me pass on a message to Lord Rama. However, before Sito could finish, Wu Ming interrupted him. No need. Ha! So, if you want to say it, you can say it yourself. Now, you and Rama can meet. Hey hey hey. Chapter 558. Wu Ming's words stunned Sito. Then, Wu Ming did not explain too much to the shocked Sito. You should go and experience it for yourself. After that, Wu Ming brought Sito, whose spirit base had been repaired, to Alexandria through the teleportation door and found Rama. Then, Rama and Sito were surprised. After all, as long as the two of them were too close, one of them would gradually weaken until one of them disappeared. In the end, the two of them who gradually got closer found that the two of them did not show any signs of fainting or even disappearing. Sito. My Sito. Lord Rama. Rama and Sito hugged each other. Everyone consciously did not disturb the couple who could never meet each other. Instead, they made space for Rama and Sito. Wuming and the others walked to the side. Facing the doubts of everyone about the attack that could split half the continent, Wuming explained what happened just now. Is that so? I didn't expect the queen to sacrifice herself. Matthew said sadly. For our little eggplant, sacrificing anyone was worth feeling sad. No, it should be said that Matthew would feel sad involuntarily. However, I didn't expect you to break the curse. Gadotzi's wrist made a sound. Director, is it fixed again? It's so fast this time. Gadotzi made a sound of surprise. The voice from the terminal on Gadotzi's wrist was naturally Olga Marie's voice. Then, Olga Marie's virtual projection appeared. Although he did not know the truth, Wuming could more or less guess. The light beam attack just now once again cut off the connection with Chaldea. Now, it seemed that Da Vinci, who was in charge of repairing it, had become more familiar with it. Or it could be said that the communication device gradually became more advanced and only needed a simple repair. Let's not talk about this first. I also heard my servant just now. Then, is it possible that such a situation will happen again? Olga Marie was referring to the nature demon god pillar that automatically appeared with the help of the Holy Grail and the servant. If such a Holy Grail was taken to Chaldea, it was better to be safe than sorry. If a demon god pillar appeared, the fragile Chaldea would be destroyed directly. After all, Chaldea's instruments were just some things that were not very sturdy for servant-level people. If the demon god pillar appeared, they would be done for. You don't have to worry about that. The Celtic Holy Grail and the Greek Holy Grail have already been purified by me with a large amount of mana. There's no possibility of summoning the demon god pillar anymore. As for the Roman Holy Grail, I can do the same to eliminate the threat. As for the Japanese Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail. What's wrong, assassin? Gadotzi looked at Silent in confusion. The Holy Grail of the Japanese forces has been made into my noble phantasm. Wuming scratched his head awkwardly and extended the sword of salvation in front of everyone. Ha! Not only Olga Marie, Gadotzi, and Matthew, but even Achilles and Sharon were stunned. Turning the Holy Grail that the servants fought for into his own weapon, it was estimated that only Wuming could do such a thing. Of course, I will not take it away. I will give it to you. Ha! This time, everyone was collectively stunned. The servants' noble phantoms were condensed by magic power. It could be said that after the servant left, the noble phantoms could not be preserved. But listening to Wuming's words, it did not seem like he wanted to keep it. This is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material. Naturally, it can be preserved. Wuming explained very considerately. Indeed, if it is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material, it is possible to leave the servant's body. As a scholar, Sharon strictly explained to everyone. He was even more certain that Wuming's words were correct. By the way, the attack just now did not cause any harm to you, right? Wuming looked at Gadotzi. We are completely fine. Gadotzi, who was wearing her armor, excitedly hugged Wuming's arm and shook it. Looking at Gadotzi's cheerful personality, as a teacher, Sharon also smiled. Because of your noble phantoms, the enemy's attack was completely blocked. Not only us, but even the surrounding land was unharmed. I can only say that it is great that this land was not ravaged again. Roman, who was in the corner of Olga Marie's projection, said weakly. I have to say, even if I have an immortal body, I can't block it. Achilles carried his gun with both hands and looked unhappy. That's why I taught you not to be too arrogant, Achilles. Sharon once again became a teacher. Yes, I understand. Looking at everyone chatting, Matthew felt very warm, but Matthew noticed that Wu-Ming was thinking about something. That, Senpai Cylinder, are you thinking about something? When Matthew said this, Gadotsi and the others also looked at Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming looked at everyone, then said what he was thinking. Well, for the attack just now, I don't think it was released by Floros before he died. Wu-Ming's words made everyone feel a sense of crisis. Do you mean that it was released by the Magic King himself? Olga Marie said with some uncertainty. Looking at the slightly embarrassed Roman, Wu-Ming said. After all, that's the Magic King's noble phantasm. It's not strange for the Magic King to use it himself. However, because the intensity of the light beam was similar to the one released by Floros, everyone thought that it was released by Floros before he died. But as the one who killed Floros, Wu-Ming knew that the light beam was released after Floros left the stage. In short, I will go look for him later. Wu-Ming said calmly. Then, the scene fell into silence. Only Sharon and Achilles, one of them looked helpless, and the other crossed his arms in front of his chest. There was also Attila, who had been standing beside Wu-Ming without any unnecessary actions or words since he came back. Ah! Other than Achilles and Sharon, everyone else cried out in shock. Wait a minute, Cylinder, are you going to look for the Magic King directly? Roman's face instantly appeared on the virtual projection screen. Go away. Olga Marie pushed Roman away. You're not really going to look for the Magic King directly, are you? Olga Marie looked worried. Directly looking for the Magic King or something, as expected, is still a little rushed. Gadotsi smiled with a helpless expression. Senior Cylinder, that's too dangerous. Matthew looked at Wu-Ming with a serious face. Looking at everyone trying to persuade him, Wu-Ming was helpless. Don't think that I'm too weak. After all, I'm someone with a special identity. After Wu-Ming said that, Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie remembered that Wu-Ming had fought the Magic King in the underground of the fourth singularity. Who exactly was he? In an instant, this question filled the minds of Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. Chapter 559. As for my identity, I will slowly tell you in the future. Of course, if someone who knows my identity wants to tell you, I won't stop them. After that, Wu-Ming secretly looked at Roman. This made Roman sweat profusely. In short, Tachika and Matthew should hurry back to Chaldea to rest. After all, the sixth singularity isn't something these singularities can compare to. Wu-Ming smiled and kept them in suspense. After fiercely staring at Wu-Ming, Olga Marie nodded. So, Tachika, Matthew, get ready for race shift. Let's get to work, Roman. Roman, who was reprimanded by Olga Marie, quickly left and prepared for race shift. Gadotsi nodded, indicating that she was ready, but as if she thought of something, Gadotsi looked at Olga Marie. Director, Fufu and Miss Pamilia are still in Riverton, we have to go back to pick them up. Matthew also nodded. He was worried about Fufu, but every time Fufu was in danger, no one knew where to hide. In the end, it was always able to follow Gadotsi and Matthew back to Chaldea. You don't have to worry about this. As a servant, as long as the world starts to repair, Pamilia will be automatically ejected and forced to transfer race shift. But that creature called Fufu. Wu-Ming touched his chin and entered into a state of thinking. I'm not sure if it can be ejected. Let me go to Riverton. Wu-Ming directly made the decision. Speaking of which, I'm quite interested in Fo, who Ma Shu has been talking about but I haven't seen. After saying that, Wu-Ming opened the portal and walked in. I'll be right back. A moment later, a vampire girl who was still sleeping soundly and a creature that looked like a cat, a dog, a squirrel, and a squirrel were brought over by Wu-Ming. Fu. The little creature named Fufu kept struggling in Wuming's hands, as if Wuming was a demon. Wuming loosened his grip on Fufu, and Fufu immediately ran and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder, hiding in Matthew's short hair and shivering. "Fufu, are you okay?" Matthew stroked Fufu's body with concern. "This little guy wanted to run when it saw me. Fortunately, I was fast and caught it off guard. Otherwise, it really would have escaped." Wuming looked at Fufu with a playful look, which made Fufu hide even more in Matthew's hair. It can be said that the only time Wuming met Fufu was at the Winterwood City Singularity, when Gadotsi and Matthew were about to leave. At that time, Fufu suddenly ran out of nowhere, then quickly jumped onto Matthew and hid behind Matthew's short hair. At that time, Wuming had already found that this creature was hiding from him, so he was quite interested in it. However, Wuming always felt that it was familiar, but he couldn't remember it. But because Gadotsi and Matthew were about to be transferred by Lingzi at that time, Wuming also suppressed his interest. Now, Wuming finally knew. Wasn't Fufu the cat demon named Cassipalug that he once killed in Britain? It seemed that the cat demon was not completely killed, but in the end, it seemed to have been adopted by Merlin. "Fufu, don't be afraid, Senpai Cylinder is not a bad person," Matthew comforted while stroking Fufu hiding behind his neck with one hand. However, Fufu was still scared to death and refused to come out from behind Matthew's neck. However, Wuming was not surprised. After all, Fufu was facing someone who almost killed him. Of course, Fufu would be scared. Not only that, Wuming, who had the origin force, could also see the nature of Fufu, just like how Wuming could see the nature of Roman at a glance. Fufu was one of the fourth beast, Beast 4, that held the principle of comparison. Strictly speaking, if Fufu grew up, it would be a creature on the level of Tiamat. Although Wuming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat, Wuming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat. Now, Fufu in Wuming's eyes was like Wuming in the eyes of the magic king who had obtained the origin force. They were both immature existences. Wuming now understood why he could not see Fufu. It was because Fufu had been trying to avoid him. Not only because Wuming was once an enemy, but also because Fufu, or one of the fourth beast, loved and protected humans. Wuming, who loved and protected humans, was a natural enemy. Fufu, who had grown up a little, could not defeat Wuming. Now, Fufu, who had not grown at all, was not Wuming's opponent. It did not mean that an ordinary servant could kill it. After all, no matter how useless a dragon was, it was still a dragon. Ordinary people could not tease a dragon like the saying, "A dragon in the shallows will be teased by a shrimp." However, the reason why Fufu became like this was all thanks to Matthew. The fourth beast would absorb the evil characteristics around it and evolve into a beast. As long as the fourth beast stayed in human society, it would absorb the negative substances of human society and evolve into a terrifying beast. Fufu, who was only with Matthew all year round, was completely unable to absorb the evil information of the outside world. The result was obvious: Matthew did not have the evil of human beings that Fufu needed, but the good of human beings. Therefore, Fufu was still in the most ordinary form. However, this was also good. If it went on like this, the fourth beast would be defeated sooner or later, and it would be effortless. Sure enough, Matthew is a good boy. Wuming smiled gently. Ha! But this made Matthew a little overwhelmed. Wuming did not explain and just shook his head. Well, let's leave quickly. I still have to find that guy. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at the surviving servants. I am waiting for your summon, Tachika. I will teach you a good lesson as your teacher. Sharon said with a smile. No problem, teacher. Gadotsi saluted playfully. Yes, summon me too. Although I am not as good as this guy, I am still very strong. Achilles looked at Wu Ming, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. This made Wu Ming smile a little helplessly. If possible, can you let me and Sito go with you? At this time, Rama and Sito came over. Chapter 560. Go together. Gadotsi was puzzled. Yes. Romo nodded and then looked at Wu Ming. Thanks to my friend, I can now reunite with Sito. I'm really grateful to you, my friend. Romo looked at Wu Ming gratefully. Thank you, Master Cylinder. Sito did the same. He looked at Wu Ming with a grateful expression. But it seems that it's because of the effect of the Holy Grail that I and Sito can be together. The Holy Grail doesn't belong to me and Sito, and if I and Sito are separated again, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to get along like this. So, I and Sito are considering whether we can go together. It was not easy for a couple to be summoned together, not to mention that both of them still had the curse on them even after they became heroic spirits. After all, this was the curse that had troubled Romo and Sito for a long time. Only a miracle like the Holy Grail could make this curse disappear temporarily. In this way, Gadotsi, who accepted Romo and Sito's proposal, could not only bring the Holy Grail back to Chaldea, but also let Sito and Romo continue to reunite, and also increase the strength of Chaldea's servants. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone, why wouldn't he do it? Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, and then looked at Olga Marie. Well, if we use a special method to mark Romo and Sito, and then use the method of summoning servants, it's not impossible to summon the 2 of you from this singularity. Olga Marie pondered as she began to mark the spirit bases of Rama and Sito. You 2, stand over here. Then, while Romo and Sito were accepting the spiritual base mark, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at Wu Ming again. I'm the one who prepared the Holy Grail for you. You can do whatever you want with it. Wu Ming said with a smile. Besides, Olga has begun to mark Rama and Sito's spiritual base. She is going to send them to Chaldea. Why are you still asking me? Wu Ming joked. Hearing Wu Ming's words, Gadotsi and Matthew both laughed. After all, Assassin helped us get the Holy Grail, so we have to ask. You little guy. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and touched Gadotsi and Matthew's little head, messing up their hair. Why am I touched? Matthew said weakly. At this time, Olga Marie suddenly spoke. It's done. As expected, marking a servant's spiritual base is nothing to me. Olga Marie proudly said, raising her neck like a white swan. Yes, Olga is the best. Wu Ming smiled as if he was praising a child. Although it was not easy to mark a servant with the Holy Grail in their body, it was not difficult. It could be said that if it was Roman, he could also do something like marking a servant who took the initiative to accept the mark. All in all, as long as Tachika comes back, immediately summon Romo and Sito, then they can be brought to Chaldea. Then, Gadotsi looked at Romo and Sito. Then, welcome in advance, Mr. Romo, Miss Sito. Romo and Sito also looked at each other and smiled. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. At this time, Wu Ming quietly came to the side of Olga Marie's projection and asked. Is there any problem? Let the servants go to Chaldea. Of course, there is no problem. Chaldea has a lot of servants who accepted Tachika's summon. Olga Marie said that there was no problem at all. This made Wu Ming stunned. When he went to Chaldea, he didn't see any other servants. As if she saw Wu Ming's thoughts, Olga Marie smiled helplessly. I heard from Romani that you only stayed in the control room for a short while. Did you go out and see? Chaldea prepared a lot of servants' rooms, and there were a lot of servants living there. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. Indeed, although he went to Chaldea, he only stayed for a short time, and he only stayed in the control room for a short while. At this time, Roman's voice came. Reiki transfer is ready, Tachika, Matthew, get ready. Everyone immediately made way for several people who were preparing for Reiki transfer. And this. Wuming picked up the Holy Grail that was still on the unconscious Roman blonde girl next to him. Anyway, it would disappear later, so it didn't matter. With a gentle toss, Wuming threw the Roman Holy Grail into Gadotzi's hand. Then, a lot of magic appeared around Gadotzi, Matthew, and Pamilia, who was still sleeping. That was the precursor of Reiki transfer. Then, Wuming threw the Sword of Salvation in his hand, and the Sword of Salvation was directly attached to the ordinary knight's sword on Matthew's waist. The armor may disappear after returning to Chaldea, but this Holy Grail made of Holy Grail will not disappear. You can use it, or use it as a relic to summon me. In short, you can use it as much as you want. Gadotzi touched the armor on her body, Matthew touched the sword on his waist, and nodded at Wuming. Then, Gadotzi and others turned into light and disappeared. As soon as Gadotzi and others left, Achilles and Karen's body began to glow. "Oh, I'm running out of magic." Sharon touched the back of his head in embarrassment. "I'll take my leave first." With that, Sharon turned into magic and disappeared. "Looks like I'll have to disappear early, just like my teacher. Then, whether it's Sodric or Celander, let's have a good fight next time." "No problem, let's have a good fight next time, Achilles." Wuming smiled at Achilles. Then, Achilles disappeared as well. Then, the unconscious Roman blonde girl who had lost the protection of the Holy Grail also turned into light and disappeared after Achilles disappeared. At the same time, rays of magic light rose from other parts of the continent, which was a sign that the followers had left. Perhaps, only Attila and Wuming were left in this singularity. At this moment, the entire singularity began to shake violently. This was the sign that the singularity that had lost the Holy Grail was beginning to be repaired by the power of historical correction. "Why, don't you want to say goodbye, my friend?" Wuming smiled at Attila. "There's no need," Attila said coldly. But the silence at the beginning meant that Attila's heart was not cold. "That's true. It won't be long before I release you. This is the promise I made to you as your first friend." Attila looked at Wuming and did not speak. Wuming did not speak to Attila again. The two quietly watched the singularity begin to be repaired and waited for their departure. Then, Attila's body began to glow. "Then I'll wait." Wuming looked around, but there was no one around. Wuming stretched. "Then, it's time to find the fake magic king." Chapter 561. In the source of chaos, traces of light came from the center of the chaos. It was strange. It was chaos, but there was a center, which gave off a rather contradictory feeling. In the center of the light, a giant dragon was sleeping on the platform formed in the center. The light was emitted from the giant dragon's body. Beside the giant dragon, there was a smaller dragon with 4 pairs of horns on its head. Interestingly, apart from the size and number of horns, the smaller dragon was exactly the same as the giant dragon. The little dragon was casually walking around the giant dragon, but it never left the giant dragon's surroundings. It just kept walking like this. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the eyes of the smaller dragon did not have any consciousness. Although it was walking freely, it gave off the feeling of a puppet. After an unknown period of time, the smaller dragon was still walking around, but the giant dragon woke up from its deep sleep. Wuming slowly opened his eyes, and an unknown aura spread in all directions as Wuming opened his eyes. It was the coercion that belonged to the origin dragon. If there were fantasy breeds around at this moment, they would be immediately suppressed by Wuming's coercion. After sensing the natural release of power, Wuming shook his head slightly. "I lost my dragon's coercion, but I gained a higher level of coercion." Wuming slowly propped up his body and opened his huge dragon mouth. Roar, a roar that was different from a dragon's but louder than a dragon's echoed throughout the entire source. Then, as though a bright lamp had been placed in the chaos, the entire source was instantly covered by the light emitted from Wuming's body. Master, are you awake? At that moment, a voice came from the top of the smaller dragon's head. At that moment, the smaller dragon's body was no longer moving. Instead, it stopped steadily beside Wuming like a standby machine. Collis, it's been hard on you. Wuming supported his upper body and stretched. His huge dragon head looked at the small dragon that looked exactly the same as him. To be precise, he was looking at the top of the smaller dragon's head. There's no such thing, Master. Although a lot of time may have passed on your side, only a short while has passed on Collis's side. While speaking, the smaller dragon's pair of dragon horns suddenly detached from its head. Then, the dragon horns grew larger and merged with Wuming's head, turning him into a giant dragon with 4 horns. Oh. Could it be that you've used my body to adjust the time of the root of everything? The crimson eyes were filled with surprise. Wuming had no choice but to create this small dragon because Wuming's main body had to guard this place to prevent a sneak attack. If Wuming wanted to go out, he had to use this backup body. However, this backup body was created by Wuming using his own flesh and blood, as well as other materials, as well as origin energy. In that case, it was not strange that this body had Wuming's main body's abilities. However, Wuming had never done much research on this body, so it was only used as a backup body when Wuming went out. But now, it seemed that this backup body's abilities had been developed by Collis. She could actually adjust the time difference between the outside world and the source. Master, please punish me, Collis said in a low voice. Wuming naturally knew what Collis was referring to. She had developed his backup body without his permission. Like a paranoid person, he would definitely suspect that Collis was trying to replace Wuming. After all, apart from combat strength and adaptability to time and space, Wuming's backup body was no different from Wuming's main body. In other words, it was not impossible for Collis to use Wuming's backup body to betray Wuming. However, Wuming did not think so. Putting aside the fact that Collis was destined to be unable to rebel against him, Wuming believed that Collis would not betray him. Time had proven that the bond between Wuming and Collis was unbreakable. Although Collis was a magic costume, Wuming did not treat her as a magic costume. Instead, he treated her as a friend, partner, or subordinate. In short, she was someone he could trust. Why would I punish you, Collis? I can't thank you enough. Wuming shook his head. Xiao An is stubborn. If I don't take the initiative to talk to her, she will treat herself as a weapon. As for you, you often take the initiative to talk to me. You even protect me when I use my servant's body to go out. Why would I punish someone like you? Wuming extended his dragon claw and touched Collis. You're too kind, Master. This is what I should do. Dragonhorn said softly. However, he felt that Collis was enjoying it. After hearing Wuming's words, the chain seemed to be dissatisfied with Wuming's words. It resisted slightly and gently knocked on Wuming's body. However, to Wuming, it was simply acting coquettishly. After comforting Enkidu, Wuming continued. Besides, you helped me develop this body's ability. I can't be happier. Why would I punish you? If this body could be like Wuming, then it could replace Wuming to guard the house, and Wuming's body could go out. Who doesn't want to use their original body? Who wants to use a fake body every day? Then, the next time I go out with my original body, Collis will come with me. Wuming suddenly said. Thank you, Master. Although Collis was a magic costume, she also had her own thoughts. She could see that Wuming wanted to make up for the loneliness in her heart. After all, you are not my slave. Don't talk about letting you stay here every day. If it were me, I would be bored to death. Wuming's dragon face showed a helpless expression. Wuming believed that Kalas was too lonely. That was why she worked so hard to develop this body, which diverged the time between the origin and the outside world. This way, she would be able to see Wuming soon and wouldn't have to wait for a long time. Although Wuming didn't think it would be a long time. After all, Wuming only spent a few days or so to go out of the singularity with the body of a servant. However, for Kalas, even if she didn't see Wuming for a day, she would still be lonely. She was a sentient tool that was determined to have a master when she was just born. After she gained the master's favor and decided to serve the master forever, she realized that the master would leave her side every few days. Even if she had a lot of knowledge and experience, after losing the master that she could rely on, Kalas, who was actually less than a year old, couldn't accept it. Even if it was just for a short period of time. With that thought in mind, Kalas successfully controlled Wuming's spare body and developed the ability to control the internal of the origin. Simply put, it turned from an ordinary robot in the lab into a central controller. Then, let me test the performance of this body. Saying so, Wuming put his claws on the spare body that was smaller than his original body. In an instant, the spare body's eyes emitted a bright light, making people feel as if they had been turned on. Chapter 562. Two dragons, one large and one small, stood on the platform inside the origin. The small dragon was moving about while the large dragon stood silently on the platform. Wuming's consciousness was still in his main body. The small dragon could move about because it was under Wuming's control. After all, the small dragon could be considered as Wuming's clone. With his spirit power rapidly developing, Wuming could already separate a sliver of consciousness from his main body and enter this body. Roar! The small dragon let out a furious roar. In an instant, the primal chaos around him rippled, and several transparent spheres appeared. On each ball, there were constantly changing images. These spheres represented every world that Wuming had been to. The small dragon pointed with its finger. One of the spheres floated over and arrived before the large dragon. Upon closer inspection, the image on the sphere was of some elementary school students in class. Has Mayu already started school? She should be in the 6th grade now. Has it been so long? Wuming sighed. I clearly said that I would return soon. I can only say that I didn't expect the enemy to be so difficult to deal with. Wuming looked at Mayu, who was listening attentively in class with nostalgia. Ripples appeared in his eyes as if he was reminiscing about his past experiences with Mayu. Coming back to his senses, Wuming looked to the side. He saw the sleeping Ilya and Chloe, who was trying to tease Ilya. These two little fellows. Wuming shook his head with a smile. Fortunately, I have the means to control the passage of time. I was afraid that Mayu would have become adults by the time I returned. As Wuming spoke, the small dragon pointed with its finger again. The sphere that represented Mayu's world fluctuated slightly. This way, the passage of time in Mayu's world will be extremely slow compared to other worlds. This way, Wuming would be able to return before Mayu's 6th grade winter break and fulfill his promise with Mayu. Then, Wuming controlled the small giant dragon to bring the balls of the other worlds that Wuming had been to before to Wuming. Wuming looked at the world of the god slayers, paying attention to the daily lives of his god of disobedience's minions and his beautiful female knights, and then felt a little helpless. As expected, the gods of disobedience are indeed the gods of disobedience. They seem to have settled down, but they still caused a lot of trouble, and Wuming switched to an image on the ball. The person on it was Wuming's authoritative spirit bead, Neza. Basically, it's this guy who leads them, Wuming said with a gloomy expression. In the world of the god slayer, Neza, who was about to go to Italy to steal the sword of the king of swords, Salvatore Toni, suddenly felt a chill on his back. After looking around cautiously, Neza decided not to go in. Wuming smiled helplessly, shook his head, and then looked at the other worlds. In the big underground tomb of Nizalik, demiyugos, and Bade were discussing something. It seemed that they had listened to Wu Ming's words and did not go out for the time being. They were trying to hide in the big tomb as much as possible. Although I don't care much about good or evil, I still can't help but worry about these guys with -500 justice points. Wu Ming said helplessly. Let's just pause the time of this world. After all, it could be shut down later. There was no difference. With that thought in mind, Wu Ming controlled the small giant dragon to tap lightly on the ball that represented this world. In just an instant, the ball seemed to be frozen with a layer of ice. The people in the ball, or rather, the world, were completely frozen. It was not an ordinary freeze, but a freeze that interfered with time and space. Therefore, the people in that world did not notice it. Let's just do the same to the other worlds. Wu Ming smiled irresponsibly. Although it was indeed very convenient, it was almost useless in the world where the Magic King was. The reason Wu Ming could affect Mao's world was because Wu Ming had protected that world before he left. Now, the world where the fake Magic King was in was no longer under Wu Ming's control. The fake Magic King who had grasped part of the power of Source was not to be trifled with. If not for the fact that the fake Magic King could not reach the major source, he would have probably replaced Wu Ming long ago. At that time, the fake Magic King could really be said to be invincible. But now, although I can't say I'm invincible, I'm not afraid of you. Wu Ming's dragon face showed a smile. Immediately after, Wu Ming adjusted the flow of time in the world of the Sky Wings. Of course, when he said, let's just do the same to the other worlds, it was a joke. Then, Wu Ming controlled this body to lie in the center of the platform and began to act as a guardian. As for Wu Ming, he prepared to leave the major source and go on a trip. Collis, I need to find trouble with an imposter. But before Wu Ming could finish, Collis interrupted him. I will follow Master. Collis did not give Wu Ming a chance and continued. Master's backup body already has the ability to protect the major source, so I don't need to stay with it anymore. Also, Master, you said before that the next time you leave with your main body, you'll take me with you. You can't go back on your word. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Was he reaping what he sowed? All right. After all, we haven't worked together for a long time. I'm really not used to not having your help. After all, there were many things that required knowledge, and without Collis, Wu Ming did not know what to say. After all, ever since Wu Ming obtained the nameless spellbook, he had stopped learning magic. After having Collis, he had left everything that needed to be recorded to Collis. From the looks of it, Wu Ming was very lazy. It could be said that if it was not for the nameless spellbook, Wu Ming would have even recorded the methods of using magic in Collis' database. Collis had not only complained about Wu Ming's laziness, but Wu Ming had always brushed her off with the same answer. After all, it's very hard on me. With Collis here, I don't have to work so hard to remember things. Would Collis leave me? Then, these words made Collis feel insulted, and Collis furiously retorted. How could that be? I'll always follow Master, until eternity. And then, there was no and then. Then, let's go together, my Collis. Yes, my Master, my Lord. Then, there was only a small dragon left in the major source. However, judging from the dangerous glint in its eyes from time to time, this place was not without threats even after Wu Ming left. At the very least, it could be seen from the fact that the black mud outside the route did not have the guts to enter after Wu Ming left. Chapter 563. Outside the M-shaped moon world, an ancient and noble temple that occupied a huge area was located in the void. This was a place located outside of time and space. Its name was the Crown Time Temple. Although it was a temple, it was an open-air venue. If someone stood anywhere in this temple, they only needed to raise their head to see the mysterious scene of the endless universe. On a platform located at the highest point of the innermost part of the temple, a throne comparable to the giant stone throne on the 10th floor of Nazalek was located there. On this throne, there was a man with one hand supporting his chin and the other on his abdomen. He was taking a nap with his eyes closed. Suddenly, the man spoke. Did Floros fail? The man who suddenly spoke seemed to be talking to someone. It was as if he was talking to himself. It doesn't matter. I already guessed the result. Even if you have my power, it's not realistic to deal with him. As he spoke, the man opened his eyes. His scarlet pupils seemed to contain supreme wisdom, but his eyes made people feel cold. I feel it. He's coming. As he spoke, the man looked up at the void. I didn't want to attack you so soon, Origin Dragon. I still want to see Chaldea struggle. But since you're looking for death, don't blame me. As he spoke, the man's face began to turn ferocious. His eyes turned blood red and the corners of his mouth cracked to his ears. Let my Temple of Time deal with you. On the other side, a huge white dragon was swimming in the void like the universe. Its ruby-like dragon eyes were looking around. It's almost there. Now, even without the black mud imprint, I can feel that incomparably hostile power. Although he didn't know why, Wuming now knew that he could completely sense the gathering place of those natural enemies. Then, Wuming saw the huge aperture that belonged to the M-shaped moon world and the throne of the temple embedded in the void above the aperture. It's really the periphery of the M-shaped moon world. Wuming had an expression of, I knew it. Every world was fixed in a certain place in the void. Although the M-shaped moon world had countless parallel worlds, they were all in the same place. If one entered the huge aperture directly, one would immediately enter a parallel world. And if one wanted to enter a specific parallel world or a certain point in time or even a singularity, one would need to use the space-time tunnel. Wuming used the space-time tunnel previously, but Wuming didn't find any additional singularities. Then, Wuming laughed self-deprecatingly. The other party had the power of the origin, so how could he still exist in a singularity? Wuming understood that the person he was looking for couldn't be bound by time and space, so he must be in the void of the various worlds that wasn't affected by time and space. Without any hesitation, Wuming flew straight to the temple. Just as he entered the temple, Wuming felt hostility and realized that something wanted to attack him. An indescribable voice sounded. Then, countless tentacles attacked Wuming. No, they weren't tentacles. They're actually demon god pillars. Wuming squinted his huge red dragon eyes and said. Wuming also thought that these were tentacles at first. Although demon god pillars could use tentacles, the tentacles of demon god pillars were spiral-shaped pieces of flesh. However, the tentacles that were attacking them were full of eyes. Taking a closer look, these were clearly demon god pillars. It was just that Wuming's body had become a lot bigger, so when he looked at the demon god pillars, they looked like small tentacles. Thinking about it, it's just tentacles. They're useless against my servant body, so how could they be useful against my main body? Wuming shook his head. However, could the demon god pillars themselves be enough to deal with Wuming's main body? The answer was naturally no. Roar. It was clearly the void, but Wuming's roar reverberated in the void. After hearing Wuming's roar, the demon god pillars suddenly stopped, but they didn't stop. If one looked carefully, the demon god pillars' movements would become awkward. These low-level creatures were frightened by the pressure of Wuming, a high-level creature. Sure enough, you're worthy of being that guy's subordinates. But I didn't expect to subdue you with just a roar. After saying that, Wuming didn't stop and continued to fly forward. Immediately, Wuming's body emitted light, like a lamp in the darkness. The light instantly covered the demon god pillars. Then, faint golden lightning appeared in the light. In terms of attack, this move didn't seem to cause any damage. Instead, the demon god pillars felt a warm feeling. However, Wuming's attack was naturally not that simple. The intense light made it impossible to see the demon god pillars covered by the light. Then, the light suddenly erupted with golden lightning. After a few breaths, Wuming withdrew the light, and the demon god pillars that were originally covered by the light were nowhere to be seen. The power of the blade of salvation isn't something that a mere demon god pillar can block, Wuming said indifferently, not taking the demon god pillar's destruction to heart. Then, Wuming continued to fly to the platform of the temple where the throne was located. As for the other demon god pillars, it was unknown whether they were afraid or under someone's orders. In short, they didn't touch Wuming anymore. Or rather, they didn't seek their own deaths. Wuming flew to the platform that was so wide that it was unseemly, and slowly descended. Dragon of origin, have you come? Are you ready to accept your death? The man from before was still sitting on his throne with one hand supporting his chin, emitting the aura of a king. His originally ferocious face had now returned to a harmless look. After all, I don't think it's appropriate to leave you behind the scenes. As expected, it's better to get rid of you now. Wuming said casually, as if getting rid of the man on the throne was like squashing an ant. You don't have to talk nonsense with me. Dragon of origin, if you've grown up, I might be afraid. But the current you isn't enough for me to take you seriously. The man's words were filled with arrogance. Although Wuming was very displeased, it made Wuming smile inside. No matter when, arrogance was a great taboo. Facing the arrogant man, Wuming thought he had already won half the battle. Speaking of which, I thought you were at a singularity. I didn't expect you to be in the void outside the world. Wuming didn't continue the topic from before, and instead talked about this place. Originally, Wuming thought that the other party's base was also a singularity. After all, it was burned on Earth, and the temple that had no foothold could only create a singularity to be independent. As mentioned before, Wuming thought so and entered the space-time tunnel. In the end, he didn't find a singularity. Therefore, Wuming directly came to the void. Relying on the Dragon of Origin's natural characteristic of flying freely in the void, Wuming came to the vicinity of the M-shaped moon. In the end, Wuming really did find it. It could be said that the current Temple of Time was no longer a singularity, but an existence that was truly attached to the void. If it was allowed to develop, it might even become an independent world. That was indeed the case. But one day, the black mud accidentally came to my temple. The man didn't mind Wuming changing the topic. Instead, he enthusiastically answered Wuming's question. Although Wuming already knew. The man suddenly stretched out his hand, and a mass of black substance appeared in his hand. After Wuming saw the black mud, he immediately felt uncomfortable. The feeling of a natural enemy surged in his heart. To be honest, if it was me in the past, I might have been affected by these things. However, from what I see now, these black mud are completely increasing my strength. As he spoke, the man stood up. My temple of time can be separated from the singularity and become independent of the world. It's all thanks to the power of origin, Dragon of Origin. The man laughed loudly, and his face was full of devastation. That being said, you haven't fully grasped the power of origin, have you? King Solomon's faker, or rather, it would be better to call you Gidia. Wuming's words made the man frown, and he was stunned. Chapter 564. That's right, I am Gidia, commander of the 72 Demon God Pillars Amalgamation, Demon God King Gidia. Saying that, the man's outer appearance ignited, and immediately, the man's appearance changed completely. He was humanoid, but much taller than an ordinary person, as well as strangely thick forelimbs. A hole appeared in the center of Gidia's chest, and a purple eye-like orb was embedded in the hole, making people shiver. Blood-like vein patterns didn't seem to have been adjusted, but actually covered Gidia's body in an orderly fashion, connecting to the orb in front of Gidia's chest. He couldn't be called human, but had a bald head that looked like a human. On his head grew 2 antlers, but more like tree branches. This was the demon god King Gaia. It was different from Solomon's monster, demon god King Gaia. As expected, you are King Solomon's creation. Wu Ming's draconic eyes narrowed. There's nothing strange about that. Although I'm Solomon's creation, after King Solomon's death, there's nothing strange about me occupying Solomon's body. It could be said that the 72 demon god pillars came from Solomon's magic grimoire Raymond Gayton, also known as Gidia. And after King Solomon's death, the name of the collective that was formed in King Solomon's body was very easy to guess. It was Gaia. The awakened Gidia could be said to be Solomon. After all, Solomon and Gidia were both characters who commanded the 72 demon god pillars, so it wasn't strange for Gidia to occupy the dead Solomon's body. But you really surprised me, Origin Dragon. Demon god King Gidia raised his head, looking at Wu Ming's draconic head. Even the taller Gidia wasn't as large as Wu Ming's original body. Wu Ming was still looking down on Gidia. Then, are you surprised that I know you haven't completely grasped your origin, power, or are you surprised that I know your identity? Wu Ming said with incomparable calmness. He was not frightened by Gaia's appearance that was neither human nor ghost at all. After all, he had seen too many dirty things and had gotten used to it. I have both, Gaia smiled and continued. Indeed. Although I've obtained the power of the black origin soil and used it to move my temple from the singularity to the void, that's all there is to it. In fact, I'm worse than you described. I don't actually control the power of the black origin soil at all, and I'm only relying on the byproduct of controlling the black origin soil. As if he had embarrassed himself, Gidia put the black origin soil back into his body. To be able to guess that I haven't fully grasped the power of origin, it's probably because I've never invaded another world. In response to Gidia's words, Wu Ming nodded. That's right. After all, I'm in the real origin, which is connected to other worlds. I can still do a simple check on your situation, Wu Ming said calmly. As mentioned before, the origin was like a control panel, and Wu Ming was the key to the control panel. Wu Ming, who had gradually grown by absorbing the power of the origin from the origin, gradually unlocked the power of the control panel. For example, he could use the time of the worlds that Wu Ming had visited as well as a simple check on Gidia's situation. However, that was all there was to it. The current Wu Ming didn't have the power to destroy a world with a flick of his finger. Otherwise, Gidia wouldn't have looked down on Wu Ming so much. After all, if Wu Ming had that kind of power, Wu Ming would have eliminated Gidia, who stole the power of origin. If Wu Ming wanted to possess that kind of power, he would have to grow into an adult to obtain that kind of power. Gidia knew a bit about the origin dragon through the origin black mud, so Gidia wasn't worried about Wu Ming doing anything to him. A certain person was entrusted with a treasure comparable to a nation, but because they were too young, that person couldn't open the key to the treasure, and who knew how long it would take for that person to obtain the key. As a result, some people with ulterior motives would definitely play tricks and wouldn't care about that person's thoughts. Gidia was such a person. By the time Wu Ming grew up, Gidia would have achieved his goal. Then, how did you know that I wasn't Solomon? Gidia asked. It could be said that Gidia only cared about and was surprised by this matter. In my impression, you have never seen Solomon, and your knowledge of him is only from historical records. How can you say my real identity so accurately? Then, Gidia shook his head. Don't say that because Raymond Gayton is called Gidia, you guessed that I was the one who occupied King Solomon's body. That would be too degrading. This made Wu Ming stunned for a moment. He was indeed going to say that. Oh, then make a guess, Gidia. Wu Ming looked at Gidia jokingly. Then, after Gidia thought for a few seconds, he gave Wu Ming an answer. I think the biggest possibility is that you met our king, Solomon, without me knowing. That's the case. Wu Ming smiled. Although Wu Ming's face was smiling, Wu Ming's heart was as if he was facing a great enemy. Gidea's IQ is inexplicably online. Those so-called great villains without IQ seem to be lying. I just saw the real King Solomon, so I knew you were fake. Based on this, I inferred your identity as Gidea. Sure enough. Gidea nodded slightly. Then, I don't know if you can see my other identity, the Dragon of Origin. This time, it was Gidea's turn to let Wu Ming guess. You don't need to tell me, I will do the same, the first beast. Wu Ming revealed Gidea's other identity. One of the 7 great human evils, the beast with the principle of mercy, Beast Eye. Wu Ming had already seen through Gidea's identity through the power of origin, when Gidea appeared. Even if Gidea had the origin, black soil on him, Wu Ming could still see through it as easily as if he saw through Fufu's identity as the 4th beast. Or rather, it was because of the origin, black soil on Gidea's body that it made it easier for Wu Ming to see through Gidea's identity as the first beast. It seems that I really underestimated you, Dragon of Origin. Then, Gidea raised one of his hands. In front of my great cause, you are really an eyesore. As Gidea spoke, Wu Ming's muscles tightened. Then, you will die here, Dragon of Origin. In an instant, countless black flames shot out from Gidea's hand toward Wu Ming like a machine gun. Roar! Wu Ming let out a furious roar, flapped his huge dragon wings, and dodged the black flames in an extremely unscientific manner. That's what I had in mind. You can leave here today, Gidea. Wu Ming, who had flown into the sky above the lookout, opened his mouth abruptly, and a pale golden flame shot out like a high-pressure water gun, shooting towards Gaia like a tooth for a tooth. Good timing. Gidea yelled and waved his hands. A pure energy barrier appeared before Gidea and blocked Wu Ming's origin, dragon breath. This was the first official confrontation between the young dragon of origin, Wu Ming, and the deity warden king, Gidea, who had obtained the origin, black soil. It could be said that whether it was Gidea's black flames or Wu Ming's origin, dragon breath, ordinary servants couldn't resist them at all. If they were ordinary people, they would have been burned to ashes before coming into contact with them, just like ordinary humans approaching the sun. However, for the 2 of them, who could be said to be superior in terms of status and strength, those were just ordinary attacks. Gidea never thought that his black flames could kill or even injure Wu Ming, and Wu Ming was naturally not naive enough to think that his ordinary dragon breath could burn Gidea to death. All of this was just the first confrontation. The real battle had only just begun. Chapter 565. Boom! Like a nuclear explosion, a loud sound reverberated through the entire temple. Thick smoke rose from the depths of the temple. The 72 demon god pillars appeared in various parts of the large temple, all of them staring at the depths of the temple. Swish! A holy figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the temple. Even with the countless eyes of the demon god pillars, they were unable to see this figure clearly. They could only hear the sound of something breaking through the air. Then, following closely behind the white figure, a black figure suddenly rushed out. This time, the demon god pillars saw clearly that it was their king, the leader of the 72 demon god pillars, the demon god King Gidea. Then, there was no need to guess who the white figure was. It was definitely the dragon of origin that dared to boldly fly into the depths of the temple to look for trouble with their king. In the eyes of the demon god pillars, the dragon of origin was being beaten back by their king, and was even being exterminated by their king. As a result, the demon god pillars began to dance wildly. Their huge tentacles constantly swayed as they rejoiced at the strength of their king. However, Gidea didn't pay attention to the situation of the demon god pillars. Instead, he focused on dealing with Wu Ming. Even though Gidea was chasing after Wu Ming, it was actually just Wu Ming deliberately shifting the battlefield. It wasn't that Gidea couldn't catch up to Wu Ming, but that he also wanted to shift the battlefield. If the demon god pillars entered the depths of the temple where Gidea was, they would discover that the depths of the temple had already been destroyed beyond recognition. As a formation similar to a battlefield, the Temple of Time could assist Gidea in dealing with the enemy. Moreover, because it was King Solomon's second precious artifact, it could be said to be relatively sturdy. There was basically no need to worry about it being destroyed. It could completely act as a battlefield. However, if the enemy was Wuming, it wouldn't work at all. As mentioned earlier, Gidea, who had obtained the black soil of origin, wasn't afraid of Wuming at all. However, before obtaining the black soil of origin, Gidea was still rather fearful of Wuming. The reason why the Dragon of Origin was called the Dragon of Origin was because it was born from the origin. Its body was extremely resistant to magic, and its defense against physical attacks wasn't weak either. This allowed the Origin Dragon to deal with its enemies with brute force. The Temple of Time was dragged out by Gidea through the black origin mud from the void where the singularity was formed. It was not strengthened because Gidea simply used the black origin mud to enhance his own strength. The Time Shrine itself was an A-grade relic. It was a relic of its own. It could be said that even Gilgamesh's parochial sword could destroy this noble artifact, so could it support Wuming and Gaia's battle here? Naturally, the answer was no. Moreover, Gidea wouldn't be so arrogant as to divert his attention to protect his noble artifact in the face of an origin dragon. As a result, the Temple of Time couldn't withstand the attacks of Wuming and Gidea, who had obtained the origin black soil. This was Gidea's seat. If possible, Gidea did not want to fight there. Wuming was also disgusted by the temple's support for Gidea. Therefore, Wuming and Gidea willingly left the Temple of Time and went outside. However, the reason Gidea followed behind Wuming wasn't because he was acting, but because he really couldn't catch up with Wuming. The black origin mud attached to Gidea and increased Gidea's various attributes. Even Gidea's D-grade agility was upgraded to A-grade. However, Wuming had 12 clones. As soon as the phoenix form was activated, the ability to be related to time directly prevented Gidea from catching up with Wuming. If one were to look at the data, Wuming, who had been in the Origin Dragon for a long time and absorbed a large amount of Origin Dragon's power, all of his attributes were EX, which meant that he was unpredictable. However, Wuming didn't think that he could shake off Gidea by relying on his speed alone, so Wuming chose to use the phoenix form. Wuming was very strong, but in the face of the black soil, which was his natural enemy, Wuming still felt that he was weak. Especially when the enemy was a monster like Gidea, who had obtained the origin black soil. Even if Wuming dared to fight Gidea head-on, he was still very cautious. He left the Temple of Time because Wuming was cautious, which was why he did so. However, since he had left the enemy's position, he could start again. After leaving the Temple of Time and flying into the void, Wuming suddenly turned around and whipped his huge and powerful tail at Gidea. Humph! Gidea naturally wasn't afraid. His thick fist mixed with black flames, he punched Wuming's tail. Boom! Wuming's tail was sent flying high into the air. At the same time, Wuming's head launched a platinum dragon breath at Gidea. Gidea, who had been burned, hurriedly retreated and left Wuming's attack range. After that, Wuming and Gidea stared at each other from a distance, neither moving. The situation became a standoff between the two of them. Wuming swayed his tail gently. On his white tail, there were black marks where Gidea had hit it. Those were the marks left behind by Gidea's black soil flame. In addition, there were many black marks on Wuming's body, and they were the kind that went deep into his bones. Not only that, but a lot of Wuming's dragon scales had also been shattered by Gidea's attack. Although Wuming's body was in a sorry state, Gidea wasn't bad either. Gidea's arms had burn marks, and there was a huge wound on his back that extended from his left shoulder to his right abdomen. Gidea's thick arms and thighs were also stained with black burn marks. In addition, one of Gidea's horns was also broken. Whether it was Wuming's injuries or Gidya's injuries, they were all caused by the two of them fighting like wild beasts. Gidya knew that the black soil origin restrained Wuming, so he would mix in the black soil origin in every attack. The burn marks on Wuming's body were all caused by Gidya using the black soil origin as the raw material to release the black flames. When facing the black soil origin, Wuming seemed to have no defense. Neither his dragon scales nor his magic power could defend against the black soil origin's attacks, and they were directly penetrated. Often, Gidya's flames would directly burn through Wuming's scales and muscles. Every time Wuming was attacked, it was as if he had inhaled a fatal poison, and the intense pain was mixed with intense dizziness. However, thanks to this, Wuming also took the opportunity to deal a lot of heavy blows to Gidya. The huge wound on Gidya's back had been caused by Wuming's blade of salvation, and the broken horns on Gidya's body had also been cut off by Wuming's blade of salvation. The burn marks on his body had been caused by Wuming's origin breath. Indeed, the origin breath didn't have much effect on Gidya, but many little drops made an ocean. Wuming had successfully caused a lot of damage to Gidya by repeatedly spitting out flames and condensing them into lines of fire. However, it was thanks to the black soil origin that he was able to cause double the damage to Gidya. After all, Wuming and the black soil origin were mutually reinforcing and counteracting. From the injuries of the two, it could be seen how much Gidya regretted his decision. This was also the reason why Gidya chose to leave the position that was advantageous to him. Gidya guessed that if they continued fighting like this, the Temple of Time would probably be directly torn apart. I didn't expect that. I still underestimated you, Dragon of Origin. You actually have so many tricks up your sleeve, Gidya said to Wuming calmly. Wuming's own abilities weren't enough to be fatal to Gidya. What was fatal to Gidya were Wuming's divine blade of salvation and his 12 incarnations. Whether it was Wuming's own abilities or the origin breath, Gidya wasn't afraid of them at all. Indeed, they wouldn't have any effect on Gidya. However, if it was the divine blade of salvation that was originally very strong and had been evolved by the origin after being obtained by Wuming, as well as the 12 incarnations that came from the fusion of the two gods' 12 attributes, Gidya would have to be more vigilant. Why do you think I dared to cause trouble for you? Even if you've obtained the black soil origin, you're too arrogant, Gidya. With that, Wuming directly roared, and a fireball appeared from Wuming's mouth. It was Wuming's sun incarnation. Immediately afterward, the fireball became so huge that it was large enough to cover Gidya. Then, Wuming suddenly pushed the fireball at Gidya at an extremely fast speed. Don't think that you can defeat me just because you have some tricks, Dragon of Origin. After saying that, Gidya spread open his arms, and in an instant, a large light will appeared behind him. The large light will gathered power in an instant, and then a purple-black beam of light blasted at Wuming. Boom, the battle was still ongoing. Chapter 566. Inside the root of origin, Wuming's backup machine, which was lying on the platform and taking a nap, suddenly woke up. Wuming shifted his consciousness to the backup machine. Gidya actually attracted the other black origin mud that was wandering in the void, and then self-destructed. Wuming recalled what had happened with a gloomy expression. After Wuming and Gidya left the Time God's temple, they first used the sun incarnation to clash with Gidya's third relic, causing a violent explosion. If the demon god pillars had not combined their powers to form a defense, they and the Time God's temple would have been destroyed by Wuming and Gidya's attacks. The Time God's temple was saved, although it was still in a shattered state. The 72 demon god pillars were also almost destroyed. Although they had been revived, they were still heavily injured. Then, Wuming directly returned to his human form, and used the power of the 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation to fight Gidya to a standstill. However, overall, Wuming had the upper hand. However, Gidya was someone who had lived for thousands of years. The black origin mud that he possessed could not hurt Wuming, so he used the black origin mud that was scattered in the void to trap Wuming. Wu-Ming was almost trapped in the black origin mud that Gidea had gathered. The black origin mud was a substance without a consciousness. It was also because of this that Wu-Ming was not afraid of the black origin mud. Wu-Ming was most afraid of people using the black origin mud against him. The black origin mud was like a gun. Wu-Ming was an ordinary person, and an ordinary person would not be afraid of an inanimate object. However, if someone picked up a gun and fired at Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming's life would be in danger. The 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation were Wu-Ming's guns. With a gun, Wu-Ming could fight back against the person who used a gun against him. That's right, because Wu-Ming and the black origin mud countered each other. They were basically two berserkers. However, there was a limit to how well they countered each other. Gidea had gathered almost all the black origin mud in the void. Wu-Ming in his human form was like a lone boat in the sea. It could be said that if it were not for the 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation, Wu-Ming would have died in the black origin mud tide. If silent wonder was subdued by the black origin soil, Gidea would not mind killing him. From Wu-Ming's current situation, it could be seen that Wu-Ming's outcome was still not good. When Gidea saw that Wu-Ming was about to escape from the origin black soil's encirclement, he made a bold decision. He directly let the black origin mud self-destruct. For example, in a sealed secret room, an ordinary person was holding a pesticide and killing insects. However, because he really couldn't touch the insects, he directly tore apart the pesticide sprayer violently and sprayed the pesticide everywhere in the secret room. In this way, the insects were finished. But it should be known that pesticides were also harmful to the human body. Kill 1,000 enemies, but lose 800 of your own. Wu-Ming's body disappeared in the explosion of the black origin mud, and Gidea was also injured by the self-destruction of the black origin mud. Wu-Ming could guess what Gidea was thinking. The current Wu-Ming was quite difficult to deal with. After letting him go, there was no guarantee that Wu-Ming would not become stronger again. It could only be said that Gidea was worthy of his reputation. He didn't even think about it, or it could be said that he directly detonated the black origin mud after careful consideration. As a result, Wu-Ming's body disappeared, Gidea was injured, and the black origin mud was almost completely destroyed. Wu-Ming, who had temporarily transferred his consciousness, knew that his body didn't die, but was injured more severely than Gidea, and had been blasted to some unknown world. For example, could you imagine someone detonating the earth to kill an ordinary person? It could be said that if Wu-Ming hadn't been soaking in the black origin for a long time to absorb its power to evolve, he would probably have died. No, it should be said that even Wu-Ming would have died in such a situation when he was fighting Artesius. It seems that the black origin is really a hotbed for me. Wu-Ming was a little regretful. He should have soaked in the black origin for a while before looking for Gidea. At the very least, he wouldn't have been forced to transfer his consciousness because of the black origin mud's explosion. Wu-Ming had transferred his consciousness because the black origin mud's self-destruction didn't just target his body, but also his mind. Physical damage could be recovered, but if his mind collapsed, it would basically be over. Fortunately, Gidea helped me solve part of the problem. Gidea had gathered almost all of the black origin mud in the void of various worlds and detonated them. It could be said that Wu-Ming no longer had to worry about the black origin mud in the void. However, the black origin mud didn't only exist in the void. According to Wu-Ming's experience, Wu-Ming already knew that a lot of black origin mud had entered various worlds. Moreover, there was no guarantee that Gidea wouldn't mass-produce the black origin mud himself. Wu-Ming guessed that the reason the black origin mud was endless was because of its asexual reproduction ability. Wu-Ming didn't believe that such a large amount of black origin mud really came from the black origin. The most important evidence was the image Wu-Ming saw when he came into contact with the black origin mud mark. The amount of black origin mud that left the black origin mud from the black origin wasn't as much as what Gidea had detonated. The black origin mud only appeared after Wu-Ming was sent away from the black origin. And Wu-Ming knew his own situation. He didn't stay in the Black Origin world for long before he was sent to another world to grow. What a headache. Wuming reached out his dragon claw and rubbed his head. This was great. Kalas and Enkidu were both on Wuming's main body, and the two of them disappeared with Wuming's main body. However, no matter what, Gidea didn't have the ability to play any tricks now. The self-destruction of the Black Origin mud was enough for him to deal with. I have to find my main body as soon as possible. It's hard to calculate the time. After all, the flow of time in the world that Wuming's main body entered might be different from the Black Origin world. The self-destruction of the Black Origin mud just now had temporarily disrupted Wuming's control of the Black Origin world. It would take some time before Wuming could find out where his main body was through the Black Origin world. And Wuming's current main body couldn't leave the Black Origin world. Who knew if there were any fish that slipped through the net in the void? If the Black Origin mud invaded, Wuming would have nowhere to cry. Sigh, looks like I can only wait. Wuming lay down on the platform and started to rest. Although Wuming had shifted his consciousness in time, Wuming's consciousness was still greatly affected. Now, Wuming felt like his head had been run over by a truck. It's hard to imagine what would happen to me if I was completely injured by the self-destruction of the Black Origin mud. If he was slightly affected, it would be like being run over by a truck. If he was completely injured, he would probably have a mental breakdown. At this moment, a letter suddenly fell from the Black Origin world to Wuming's head. A letter. This gave Wuming a fright. Wuming didn't have any malicious intent in this letter. In the Black Origin world, Wuming was half invincible. He could still detect the danger of a letter. In other words, this was a harmless letter. Then, Wuming used his telekinesis to pick up the letter that fell on his head. There was nothing else on the snow-white envelope except for the red ink on the back, which was used to ensure that the letter was sealed. It looked like a simple and plain letter that couldn't be any more simple. However, Wuming narrowed his eyes and started to think about the problem. The Black Origin world wasn't a place that anyone could enter. Now that Wuming was guarding the Black Origin world, not just anyone could enter. Unless Wuming agreed to it. Wuming looked at the letter and suddenly thought of a possibility. But before opening the letter, Wuming gathered his power and created a servant's spiritual base. This was in preparation for him to help Gadotsi at the next singularity. Then, Wuming opened the letter. Chapter 567. Above a large lake near the outer gate of Eastern District 2105380 in the Box Court world. All of a sudden, 4 figures, 2 men and 2 women, appeared 10,000 meters above the ground. Since they could not let Newton faint from crying in the toilet, the 4 figures were falling vertically due to gravity. Wuming opened his eyes, but when he noticed his current state, he did not do anything. Instead, he was thinking deeply about what had happened. On the platform inside the root of origin, Wuming opened the letter after creating a spiritual base. Immediately after that, Wuming felt that the letter was pulling him as if it was taking him somewhere. But it was clear that the letter had failed. Even if it was a backup body, the body was made from the flesh of the root of origin dragon. How could a mere letter move Wuming? Moreover, this was inside the root of origin. The half-invincible Wuming could not be pulled away no matter how one thought about it. However, Wuming had a hunch. This letter is definitely a signal sent by my real body. With that in mind, Wuming decided to take a look at the world that the letter wanted to pull him into. With the automatic management of the root of origin, there was no need to worry about the root of origin being lost. However, it also meant that Wuming's backup body could not go. Therefore, Wuming emptied his mind and allowed the letter to pull his spirit over. That was right. Wuming was now a spiritual body. No, to be precise, Wuming was now a spirit. Wuming's current state could also be called a heroic spirit. The heroic spirit's clone was called a servant. Wuming, on the other hand, had directly materialized his spiritual body. Instead of weakening the clone, he had retained the full strength of his real body. The only difference from his real body was that Wu Ming could not transform into the root of origin dragon's gigantic dragon form. Moreover, everything about Wu Ming was a magical projection without a physical body. Whether it was his tools or relics, they were all illusory. However, those tools and relics could not be used. Therefore, at this moment, Wu Ming's spiritual body could be called a heroic spirit state. Then, Wu Ming's heroic spirit state opened his eyes and appeared 10,000 meters high in the sky of this world. In short, he had arrived in an unknown world. Although Wu Ming had sorted it out in his mind, Wu Ming's doubts grew. It was his doubts about this unknown world, or rather, his desire to explore the unknown world had become more burdensome. After all, Wu Ming was a traveler. After thinking about it for a while, Wu Ming came back to his senses and began to look around. Then, he discovered his current situation. Am I in the sky? Although Wu Ming in the sky, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming. Then, Wu Ming looked at the remaining man and two women who were in free fall like him. The four of them were in a state of four different forms of free fall. Each of them occupied a corner. First, Wu Ming looked at the person on his left. He had short, light blonde hair and purple eyes. He was wearing a pair of headphones that looked more like headbands than listening to music. He was dressed in a dark blue high school uniform and looked like a delinquent. He had an unruly and surprised smile on his face. Wu Ming understood his smile. It was the excitement and joy of encountering an extraordinary phenomenon after losing all passion for ordinary phenomena. He looks like a problem child. Wu Ming commented in his mind. Then, Wu Ming looked at the person on his right. It was a young lady with the temperament of a rich lady. Her beautiful face was frowning slightly. She had black waist-length hair and flat bangs on her forehead. The ends of her long hair on both sides of her forehead were tied into braids. Two red bows were tied on both sides of her head. She wore a pure white uniform with a yellow tie and a conservative dark blue traditional dress that reached her calves. This was also a problem child, and it was a problem child in the feudal and conservative style of a rich lady. Wu Ming commented. Finally, Wu Ming looked at the expressionless girl who was holding a cat with 3 different colors of fur. Beautiful short brown hair. She was not beautiful, but she had a delicate face like a doll. There was a silver hairpin on the side of her short hair, which added a bit of cuteness to the girl. He was wearing a white sleeveless top and orange shorts, and a sleeveless white trench coat with blue edges. Around his neck was a carving that looked like a pendant. On his feet, he was wearing knee-high socks and calf-high boots. This unique combination gave people a feeling that they were dazzling, but there must be a demonic sense of evil under that face. Simply put, this was also a problem child. Wu Ming was quite troubled. Thinking about it carefully, although Wu Ming was not interested in causing trouble, Wu Ming himself was also half a problem child. I feel like I'm in trouble, Wu Ming said lightly. Then, to relax, Wu Ming looked at the scenery in the distance. As a ghost that was doing a vertical descent from a height of 10,000 meters, Wu Ming thought that the scenery here was quite good. Just kidding, in the distance, Wu Ming saw areas covered by transparent semicircles. Countless areas that looked like greenhouse bases were closely adjacent to each other, and then extended into the distance that he could not see the end of. Those transparent semicircles that looked like greenhouse sheds were some barriers. This was Wu Ming's judgment. Around the transparent sheds were a lush forest that covered a large area. The area that Wu Ming was in looked like a lush forest. All in all, this was a large area, at least much larger than Earth. However, Wu Ming was quite interested in this vast area that he could not see the end of. Even with Wu Ming's eyesight, he could not see the end, so one could imagine how big this world was. And the vastness of the world meant that there were many unknown pleasures. The reason why Wu Ming was a traveler was because of his desire to explore the unknown. However, this was not without its drawbacks. This meant that it would be very troublesome for Wu Ming to find his main body. However, seeing that he was getting closer to the ground, Wu Ming, who was about to fall, did not think about other things for the time being. Let's land safely first. As he said that, Wu Ming activated his telekinesis. In an instant, including Wu Ming, the 4 people that fell from the sky seemed to be supported by something invisible as they floated steadily to the ground. Yo, little brother, this is your method, right? It's quite interesting, isn't it? Let me thank you first. First, the delinquent young man greeted Wu Ming and thanked him after landing. It's just a small trick using my telekinesis, it's not worth mentioning. Wu Ming shook his head. Then, Wu Ming looked at the giant lake beside him. Moreover, even without me, you would only fall into this lake, at least your lives would not be in danger. But in the end, you still helped us, didn't you? The blonde young man smiled and waved his hand indifferently. I agree with this delinquent young man, even if the original result was good, but I, Jiu Fei Niao, was saved by you, the necessary gratitude is necessary. The lady named Jiu Fei Niao also thanked Wu Ming. Thank you. On the other hand, the girl who was hugging the cat was quite nimble. She didn't say anything and directly thanked Wu Ming. The 3 of them were people with strong personalities, so Wu Ming had no choice but to accept their gratitude. Then, the 4 of them exchanged names. By the way, could it be that you guys also received that strange letter? The young man named 16 Nights asked the others with a smile. Ah, so 16th Eventide has also received that letter. Miss Jiao Fei Niao replied with her arms crossed. Same. The delicate girl named Haruhi Yoshi nodded. Me too. Wu Ming was the same. However, Wu Ming did not feel that the letter he received was the same as the 3 problem children. He wanted to ask why. One word, intuition, for all However, Wu Ming did not want to be an anomaly, he wanted to be like the 3 of them. Let's not talk about the letter for now. Little brother, you're not human, right? Suddenly, 16 Nights looked at Wu Ming with an arrogant smile. Chapter 568. This made Wu Ming frown. Could it be that this seemingly delinquent boy was actually hostile towards non-humans? Don't worry, it's just that your powerful aura is making my blood boil. Normal humans can't possibly make me think this way. Wu Ming then realized that 16 Nights, Zhou Yuqi, and Haruhi Yao were standing a little far away from him. Sorry, I feel a little uncomfortable being close to you. This was what Zhou Yuqi said. I'm fine, it's just that Sanmao cat feels uncomfortable. This was what Haruhi Yao said. Including 16 Nights, the 3 of them were slightly further away from Wu Ming because of the pressure from Wu Ming's powerful aura. Wu Ming had used his spiritual form twice. The first time was when he was pulled over by Wu Ming's semi-fixed barrier, and the second time was when Wu Ming took the initiative to use it. Although the physical body was different, Wu Ming's spiritual form was the same. Because Attila was the giant god, and because Wu Ming was unfamiliar with spiritual power and had never fought with Gidia before, Wu Ming didn't put too much pressure on Attila. This time, Wu Ming's current state could be said to be the first time Wu Ming used his spiritual form on his own. In addition, he had just fought with Gidia, so the pressure didn't lose its effect because Wu Ming was a spiritual form. I'm sorry. Wu Ming smiled bitterly and retracted his pressure. I just fought with a powerful enemy, so I didn't adjust. I'm really sorry. Facing Wu Ming's apology, the 2 problem children accepted it as a matter of course. I, Zhou Yuqi, forgive you. This time, we're even. Zhou Yuqi waved her hand. Ditto. Haruhi Yao was still hugging the cat with a look of indifference. Only 16 Nights didn't care about Wu Ming's apology for unintentionally releasing his pressure. Instead, he was very interested in Wu Ming's pressure and the enemy that Wu Ming thought was powerful. Why, are you interested? Wu Ming looked at 16 Nights with interest. Of course, little brother, do you want to spar with me? Wu Ming was silent. It wasn't because someone he just met wanted to spar with him, although it was more or less. Wu Ming was slightly surprised. Falling from a height of 10,000 meters, he didn't seem to be frightened at all. He wasn't interested in Wu Ming's telekinesis either. He didn't panic even after coming to an unknown world. More importantly, these three boys and girls, they weren't affected by Wu Ming's. That was comparable to the world, or even a higher level of pressure. Wu Ming looked like an ordinary human, but the three boys and girls only subconsciously distanced themselves from Wu Ming. They didn't react to Wu Ming's pressure. Only distanced themselves from Wu Ming by a little. Only. It was obvious that these three seemingly ordinary humans were not ordinary at all and were not simple at all. Now, if someone suddenly told Wu Ming that they were the chosen ones, which was quite ridiculous, Wu Ming would believe it. Then, Wu Ming did something that would be considered a bully in the eyes of those who knew Wu Ming's abilities. Alright, let's spar. Let me see what's so special about you guys. Wu Ming thought. After hearing Wu Ming's words, 16 Knights smiled, and it was the purest kind of smile. Seeing this smile, Wu Ming was sure that this seemingly ordinary human Wu Ming wasn't as ordinary as he looked on the surface. Then, just as 16 Knights was about to tell Wu Ming what was a normal brawl, exclusive to male high school students, a rabbit suddenly jumped out. Stop. Stop. Please don't fight. Black Rabbit will be very distressed. A blue-haired girl wearing a rabbit costume as a bunny girl suddenly jumped out from the bushes. She looked at Silent and 16 Knights who were about to start fighting with each other with a troubled expression. Cosplay. It's cosplay, right? Oh, this is really pleasing to the eye. The three problem children each expressed their opinions. However, Wu Ming didn't think that this girl who seemed to be cosplaying was cosplaying because he felt the power of God from this rabbit girl. After all, Wu Ming was half a god slayer. Although he didn't bring the body of a god slayer with him, thanks to his time as a half-god slayer, Wu Ming's understanding of gods and things related to gods was still quite sensitive. Black Rabbit is not a cosplay. Black Rabbit is the noble Moon Rabbit, a nobleman. The girl named Black Rabbit shouted in exasperation, trying to prove her innocence. Moon Rabbit. Wu Ming thought thoughtfully. Wu Ming knew this word. Back in the world of the god slayers, Wu Ming read a lot of books about mythology to deal with the various gods, although Wu Ming later found it troublesome and asked Collis to save it in the database. Ahem, but Wu Ming still knew a lot of myths and legends, and the story of Moon Rabbit happened to be a myth that Wu Ming knew. According to legend, Moon Rabbit jumped into the fire and sacrificed herself in order to save an old man. Then, this action moved Sakura, and she was taken in by Sakura. In short, Moon Rabbit was a rabbit that lived by the principle of sacrifice and dedication. Black Rabbit should be the descendant of Moon Rabbit or something like that. But what was a nobleman? Wu Ming really didn't know about this. At this time, Haruai Hibaku appeared behind Black Rabbit without anyone noticing. I'll catch it. Then, Haruai Hibaku grabbed one of Black Rabbit's rabbit ears, and at the same time, he also added a voice for himself. Wah! You! What are you doing? Why are you grabbing Black Rabbit's rabbit ears? Black Rabbit looked as if her lifeline was grabbed. She nervously grabbed Haruai Hibaku's hand that was grabbing Black Rabbit's rabbit ears with tears in her eyes. Because I want to know if you're cosplaying or not. Haruai Hibaku showed a smug expression, and then the hand that was grabbing Black Rabbit's ear pulled up slightly. Wah, please stop. Black Rabbit was about to, no, it was already about to cry. Oh. Could it be that it's a real rabbit ear? Let me try too. As she said that, Milady grabbed Black Rabbit's other rabbit ear. Wah! Black Rabbit let out a mournful cry that resounded through the sky, and a group of birds flew out of the forest in fright. Don't tell me you want to pull that moon rabbit's ear too. Wu-Ming looked at Reverse 16 Knights, who was eager to try. Reverse 16 Knights smiled. I want to, but that rabbit's ear is occupied by Hiroi Hibaku and Milady. Moreover, Reverse 16 Knights looked at Wu-Ming with a fighting spirit. I'm more interested in fighting with you. Stop. Fighting is prohibited. Black Rabbit, who had finally broken free from Hiroi Hibaku's and Jo Yuasuke's torment, suddenly came in front of Wu-Ming and Reverse 16 Knights. Then, Black Rabbit took out a folding fan from nowhere, and hit Reverse 16 Knights and Wu-Ming on the head. You bunch of problematic adults. Neither Reverse 16 Knights nor Wu-Ming dodged, and both of them were hit by Black Rabbit's folding fan. Thank you for the compliment. Reverse 16 Knights smiled at Black Rabbit. I'm not complimenting you. Reverse 16 Knights, who treated problematic child as a compliment, made Black Rabbit feel helpless. However, Wu-Ming felt that Reverse 16 Knights was deliberately teasing Black Rabbit. Speaking of which, I didn't do anything, so why did you hit me? Wu-Ming subconsciously rubbed the spot on his head that Black Rabbit hit. Black Rabbit did not use any force, but Wu-Ming was slightly unhappy that he was dragged into this. I just agreed to Reverse 16 Knights' request. That's all. Wu-Ming looked at Black Rabbit with a smile. Wu-Ming would never admit that his smile at this moment was extremely mischievous. Wu-Ming's words of "that's all" made Black Rabbit feel quite helpless. Do you want to fight until there are casualties before you're happy? However, Reverse 16 Knights laughed. What are you talking about, little brother? I'm the one who picked a fight, and you're the one who fought back. Wu-Ming, on the other hand, smiled with interest. In other words, this fight must be fought, and it must be fought at this moment. Stop. Mr. Villo only agreed, I haven't made a move yet. Black Rabbit protested. However, to Reverse 16 Knights, Wu-Ming's answer was the beginning of the fight. In other words, it was the so-called fight back. Looking at Reverse 16 Knights, who did not listen at all, Black Rabbit's shoulders drooped. Then, let's postpone this fight. Can we listen to Black Rabbit explain the box court world to everyone? This sentence made Jo Yuasuke and Haruhito Yayoi, who were ready to ambush Black Rabbit, Reverse 16 Knights whose eyes were already burning with desire, and Wu-Ming who was paying attention to Black Rabbit all look at Black Rabbit. Seeing that the problematic child was so obedient, Black Rabbit smiled. Then, let's listen to Black Rabbit's explanation. Chapter 569. Then, after the Black Rabbit walked around in circles, it began to explain this world called Box Court World. First of all, welcome to the Box World. Black Rabbit opened her hands and closed one of her eyes playfully. With a smile on her face, she spoke a very enthusiastic opening line to Wu-Ming and the other three. It feels so perfunctory. Haruhito Hikari whispered to Jo Yuasuke. Indeed. Jo Yuasuke nodded respectfully. Hey! Black Rabbit instantly collapsed again. Just kidding. 2. Because Black Rabbit was teased, its ears drooped, and it looked like it couldn't take it anymore. Seeing that it was about time, 16 Knights waved his hand. Let's cut to the chase. What exactly is this box court world? 16 Knights asked rudely. Really, Mr. 16 Knights is so rude. Black Rabbit complained. However, Wu-Ming's next words made Black Rabbit's tail tighten. Let's not talk about whether it's rude or not, the person who was eavesdropping over there was you. As he said that, Wu-Ming pointed to a bush. You. What are you talking about, Mr. Villo? Black Rabbit was just passing by for some reason, ahahaha. Wu-Ming's unwavering gaze caused Black Rabbit to stop its awkward performance. Yes, I'm sorry, Black Rabbit shouldn't hide and eavesdrop, but that's all reasonable. However, Wu-Ming directly interrupted Black Rabbit's words. Okay, I didn't want to blame you. If I guessed correctly, you should have a lot to do with us coming to this world. Wu Ming's words made Black Rabbit's body tremble, and its ears drooped again. Oh, little brother, you're starting to suspect this rabbit too. 16 Knights looked at Wu Ming with a typical delinquent smile on his face. There's no other way. Wu Ming spread his hands. When we were still some distance away from the ground, I released my mental power to explore the surroundings. Not to mention the area blocked by the barrier, within the area of thousands of square meters, there are no other humanoid creatures other than the four of us and the Black Rabbit. Over 1,000 square meters. Jiu Yuan Flying Bird was shocked by Wu Ming's spiritual perception. Not only Kyugu Osaka, but Black Rabbit and Haruai Biya were also shocked. Even Reverse 16 Knights, who had always been calm in the face of such a situation, was shaken. It could be seen from his increasingly excited face. I have a question. Can Avilo's psychic power spread that far? Haruai Abe held the cat in one hand and raised his other hand. He looked quite cute. If I spread out in all directions with me as the center, the range can be much larger. If I only explore in one direction, Wu Ming closed his eyes and opened them a few seconds later to look at the local Black Rabbit. There's a spectacular waterfall in the easternmost area. There's also a snake there. If there's a chance, let's go check it out together. Could that be the world's end? Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming in shock. The world's end. 3 good heavens. This made the 3 problem children excited. Although this is the closest place to the world's end, it's still tens of thousands of meters away. It seems that Mr. Villo has an extremely powerful gift. Then, Black Rabbit looked at Reverse 16 Knights and the other 2 problem children who were eager to go and quickly waved his hand. You must not go there. The water god is there. The snake that Mr. Villo saw is Lord Water God. Now that you mention it, I want to go even more. Reverse 16 Knights' words almost made Black Rabbit cry again. Water god. Sounds like a god. If there's a chance, let's go check it out. Jiu Yuan Flying Bird did not want to go immediately. However, in Black Rabbit's opinion, it was dangerous for problem children to have such thoughts. Snake. I don't hate snakes. If possible, I would like to become friends with Lord Snake, Haruai Toshi said to the cat in his arms. However, this sentence sounded gentle, but in Black Rabbit's opinion, it was also quite dangerous. Problem children were all troublemakers. Speaking of which, that snake stared at me just now. Looks like I'll have to teach it a lesson. Wu Ming was purely having fun. Please take back your troublemaking thoughts. Black Rabbit felt that she could not do it anymore. Speaking of which, are you actually a wizard? Reverse 16 Knights looked at Wu Ming. Not really. Compared to a wizard, I prefer a warrior who uses his fists to his flesh, Wu Ming joked. Then, is the telekinesis from before also a type of spirit power? Jiu Yuan Flying Bird asked. That's right. As long as the spirit power is strong enough, it is not a problem to affect the real world. Wu Ming nodded. Then, Villo, can you use your telekinesis to make Black Rabbit stand upside down? Finally, Haruai Toshi asked the most dangerous question for Black Rabbit. Black Rabbit was stunned. Of course. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, Black Rabbit felt her body floating. No, she really floated. Then, Black Rabbit, who was 1 meter above the ground, was suddenly flipped over. Black Rabbit let out a sound that a girl should have, and tightly held on to her miniskirt. I'll grab it. Haruai Toshi and Jiu Yuan Flying Bird took the opportunity to grab the rabbit's naturally drooping ears. Please. Please stop, what's with this miniskirt? Does it defy gravity? Reverse 16 Knights looked at the miniskirt in confusion. Even though she was flipped upside down, she still did not fall due to gravity. I'm afraid it's a special piece of clothing, Wu Ming said to reverse 16 Knights. So that's how it is. This box is really amazing. 16 Knights clenched her fist and punched her other hand. Looking at Wu Ming and 16th Knights who seemed to be studying something important, Black Rabbit was completely enraged. You bunch of problematic children. A minute later, the 4 people, including Wu Ming, sat on a white cloth that Black Rabbit took out from a card. Black Rabbit, whose hair suddenly turned pink, knelt elegantly in front of the 4 people. According to Black Rabbit, her hair would only change color when her emotions changed drastically or when she was ready for battle. Needless to say, the reason why her hair changed color this time was because of Wu Ming and the others. Then, Black Rabbit, who gradually calmed down, regained her blue hair and sighed helplessly. Really, how did Black Rabbit meet such a group of problematic adults? It must be said that Black Rabbit was indeed a descendant of the Moon Rabbit clan. But in terms of dedication and sacrifice, Wu Ming felt that she was already qualified. Being teased by the people she just met, constantly grabbing her rabbit ears, and being turned upside down. It could be said that she almost lost her virginity. Anyone would be furious. Although Black Rabbit was also angry, she only pretended to be angry and then lectured Wu Ming and the others. Wu Ming simply knew that he could not make too much of a fuss, so he went along with Black Rabbit's idea. But as for the remaining 3 problematic children, Black Rabbit's hair can change color. Sigh, how interesting. Zhou Yuanfei looked at Black Rabbit's hair covetously. It is indeed interesting. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded and stroked his cat, as if he was considering whether his cat could change color. However, the cat did not give him face and shook its cat head in a very human-like manner. Stop, Black Rabbit. Don't play with Black Rabbit's hair anymore. Black Rabbit said helplessly. Black Rabbit's ears too. Seeing that the 2 wanted to say something, Black Rabbit quickly added. Tisk, X2, stop it, Black Rabbit, I heard you. Then, Black Rabbit's expression became teary again. Really, a group of problematic children, okay. It's about time to get to the main topic. Wu Ming interrupted the farce. At this time, Black Rabbit realized that she was going to explain the matter of Hakata to the 4 people, but she was interrupted by Wu Ming. In the end, it led to this series of events. In the end, if you think about it carefully, it's all the little brother's fault. 16 Knights looked at Wu Ming, who did not mind the trouble, and looked at Wu Ming with a mischievous smile. A lady will not cover for a criminal. Jiu Fei now flipped her hair and said calmly. However, her curved lips betrayed her. Yeah. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded fatally. Then, Black Rabbit looked like she was about to cry again. It's all Mr. Villo's fault. Chapter 570. Wu Ming's apology calmed Black Rabbit down a little, although 16 Knights, Zhou Yuki, and Haruai Hikari were still unhappy. Then, let's not talk about our problem for now. Please explain this world first. Then, according to Wu Ming's request, Black Rabbit began its original purpose, which was to explain the Suida world to the 3. Actually, you've all discovered that you have magical abilities that are different from ordinary people. It's because of this ability that you've been invited to this courtyard world to participate in the gift game. After Black Rabbit finished speaking, Wu Ming vaguely observed 16 Knights and the other 2. 16 Knights still looked like a bad boy without any change, but Zhou Yuki and Haruai Hikari's expressions changed slightly. This meant that these 2 girls did indeed have abilities that were different from ordinary people. Actually, thinking about it, Wu Ming excluded himself for now. Thinking about it carefully, whether it was 16 Knights who wanted to have a fight with Wu Ming, or Zhou Yuki and Haruai Hikari who looked weak but were actually not that simple, the 3 of them were not as simple as they looked. Just from the fact that they did not panic in an unfamiliar environment, or even in a foreign world, one could see that the 3 of them were not ordinary people. It was because they were not ordinary people that 16 Knights and the others could come to this world, or rather, they had the qualifications to be invited to this world. I'm afraid the so-called invitation is that letter. Wu-Ming pondered. Those abilities are basically abilities bestowed by the Asura gods, Buddhas, fairies, demons, and stars. We call these abilities gifts, Black Rabbit continued. Wu-Ming thought about this sentence for a while. Wu-Ming was not from this world, but according to this statement, most of Wu-Ming's abilities were indeed given by Asura gods, demons, fairies, stars, and other existences. And the gift game is a competition that uses gifts as a wager to compete. This world is a stage prepared for this. Black Rabbit said with a serious smile. Looks like she is very good at giving speeches. She has been a host many times. Wu-Ming guessed. Since it's a competition, then anything can be gambled, right? Wu-Ming interrupted Black Rabbit. Good question. Black Rabbit smiled. There are many types of bets. Not only can you bet on gifts, but you can also bet on gold coins, land, reputation, rights, and even the person itself. The more bets you put in, the more you will get. Isn't this a casino? Wu-Ming complained in his heart. But I don't think it's as simple as you said, Black Rabbit. After all, this was the survival principle of a world. How could it be as simple as a casino? Wouldn't that be a mess? Yes, if you want to participate in the competition, you have to get permission from the organizer, hoster, or reach the standards set by the organizer, hoster, before you can participate. Then, the Black Rabbit closed one eye, tilted its head, and extended a finger, looking playfully at Wu-Ming and the other three. As for the rewards, you have to fulfill the conditions set by the organizer, hoster, before you can get them. Then, the organizer, hoster, should be in existence that anyone can be as long as they can prepare the rewards. Wu-Ming said. Yes, Mr. Villo is right. It seems that Mr. Villo has a very thorough understanding of box court. Black Rabbit smiled at Wu-Ming. So that's how it is. To put it simply, this world is decided by the game, right? Wu-Ming suddenly asked. According to Black Rabbit's explanation and Wu-Ming's conclusion, it reminded Wu-Ming of the other world where he gave the throne of the only god to the weakest god. The god of games, Tetu. Wu-Ming guessed that 1,000 years later in that world, it would be similar to box court now. After all, it was the god of games. Wu-Ming didn't even need to think to know what Tetu would do to that world. Well, in short, there won't be any war. It couldn't be said that Wu-Ming understood Tetu. As a god born from Rick's wish, it was destined that he wouldn't be as violent as the other gods. Moreover, Rick's wish was to stop the war. Wu-Ming believed that Tetu, born from Rick's faith, would definitely abide by this wish. Or rather, he would subconsciously abide by it. If that's the case, the bestowal tournament can also be considered a game. The lowest difficulty of the bestowal tournament is the simplest form of lottery. Then, Black Rabbit's face instantly darkened. Like a demon, he looked at Wu-Ming and the other three sneakily. As for the highest difficulty, you'll have to face the Asura gods and Buddhas in a battle of life and death. Really? 16 Knights suddenly jumped up. Yes, of course it's true, Black Rabbit said proudly. Black Rabbit didn't notice 16 Knights' expression, and thought that he was frightened. Ha ha ha. That's great. The box court world is truly a beautiful place. 16 Knights bumped his fists together with a look of extreme excitement. Black Rabbit was shocked. This situation doesn't seem right. Shouldn't it be, because it's too dangerous? Black Rabbit is asking for a safe and effective way to participate in the bestowal tournament while still being able to survive? Sounds like a good idea. You can only enjoy fun when there's danger. I gave up my wealth to come here. Wouldn't it be too boring if I stayed here peacefully? Zhou Yuan Flying Bird also had a not bad expression on his face. Even Miss Fei now was like this. Black Rabbit was close to being stunned. I just want to make friends. Haruhi Masaaki's words gave Black Rabbit a glimmer of hope. But since the two of them are excited, then I'll be the same. Alright, the Black Rabbit was completely dumbfounded. What kind of logic was this? But fortunately, Wuming didn't give Black Rabbit a fatal blow. I don't mind. Although I was invited, I'm only here to look for something. Wuming's words made Black Rabbit react. Speaking of which, Black Rabbit only sent out 3 letters. Why were 4 people summoned? 16 knights and the others didn't know this question. Only Wuming knew about it. I think your 3 letters should be inviting the 3 of them. As for my letter, it's not that simple. But this gave Black Rabbit a fright. Could it be that there's a community that invited Mr. Villo? But that shouldn't be. No, if that's really the case, then it's terrible. Could it be that Black Rabbit inadvertently stole people from other communities? Community. This gave Wuming a good piece of information. Wuming guessed that it might be the name of an organization in this world, just like the Magic Association in the Godslayer world. But thanks to this information, Wuming could more or less guess the reason why Black Rabbit summoned 16 knights and the others back and treated Wuming and the others so kindly. Looking at Black Rabbit's worried look, it was obvious that Black Rabbit's community wasn't strong, or rather, super weak, so it was afraid of disputes with other communities. And Black Rabbit summoned talents from another world to supplement the community's strength. From Black Rabbit's hesitation after guessing that it was Wuming who was summoned by other communities, it could be seen that this kind of thing wasn't common. It could be guessed that there shouldn't be any other communities that needed to invite people from another world to supplement their strength. In addition, Wuming said that the invitation of 16 knights and the others was related to Black Rabbit, and Black Rabbit's mood was slightly low. It could be said that Wuming's guess was very close. Combining all the guesses, it was that Black Rabbit's community might be very weak, or it might be the weakest, so it urgently needed to supplement its strength, which was why it used such an extreme method. After all, if the invited people didn't want to join Black Rabbit's community, then Black Rabbit's invitation would be wasted. Wuming didn't think it was easy to invite people from another world. Perhaps it was easy for those powerful communities, but Wuming felt that it might be extremely difficult for Black Rabbit's community. Don't worry, I wasn't invited by other communities. I came for other reasons. Wuming's words calmed Black Rabbit, whose hair had changed color due to fear and worry. Chapter 571. Really? Black Rabbit breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. Fortunately, Wuming was not invited by other communities, and Black Rabbit's worries were not unreasonable. After all, no matter where it was, as long as it was related to benefits, it would easily lead to disputes, battles, and even deaths. And with the level of mental power Wuming displayed before, even in this world, he was a talent that was highly sought after. Wuming could imagine that if Wuming was really summoned by other communities, then after that community knew that Black Rabbit did something similar to poaching, they would definitely go against Black Rabbit's community. After all, when coming to an unfamiliar place, people often tended to be close to the first friendly force they met. If Wuming joined Black Rabbit's community because of this, then the community that invited Wuming to this world would definitely not give up. And because Black Rabbit's community was in the wrong, coupled with the fact that they were weak, even if they did not die, they would lose a layer of skin. But all of this was based on the fact that Wuming was invited by other communities. Then, Wuming looked at Black Rabbit, who was patting her full chest with a relaxed expression. Then, combined with the community you mentioned, it's almost time to start talking about the problem of your community, Black Rabbit. Wuming's words made Black Rabbit, who had just relaxed her delicate body, tremble, and she was stunned on the spot. Black Rabbit knows. Black Rabbit said with a gloomy expression. If you want to participate in the gift competition in this world, you must join a force called the community. Could it be a force like the Mafia? This sentence was inexplicably appropriate when it came from the seemingly delinquent 16 knights. No. It's not that kind of evil organization. Just like Black Rabbit's community, it's like a home. Black Rabbit looked at 16 Nights angrily. I'm just kidding, 16 Nights responded with a smile, but there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. At this moment, Black Rabbit, who was running around for home, no longer had the right to be teased. I think everyone here should roughly understand. Please continue, Black Rabbit. Jio Asaka looked at Wuming, 16 Nights Reverse, and Haruai Hiroyuki. Seeing that no one had any objections, he signaled Black Rabbit to continue. After all, what he was going to talk about next was probably the community of Black Rabbits. Introducing his own home was a very important thing. Then, the Black Rabbit lowered its head slightly, as if it was thinking about its language. Wuming guessed that Black Rabbit was considering how to convince them to join the Black Rabbit community. Then, Wuming spoke. Please raise your head, Black Rabbit. Wuming not only made the Black Rabbit raise its head, but it also attracted the attention of the 3 problem children. Let me say this first. I won't refuse to join someone just because their community is weak. Wuming's words stunned Black Rabbit. By the way, I'm the same. 16 Nights responded to Wuming's words with a wicked smile. Mr. 16 Nights. Black Rabbit looked at 16 Nights Reverse emotionally. I gave up a lot of money to come here. If the community I'm going to join is too good, I won't want to join. Jio Asaka flicked her hair and said elegantly. Miss Asaka. Black Rabbit looked at Jio Asaka even more emotionally. I just want to make friends. Then, Haruai Hiroyuki looked at Wuming, 16 Nights Reverse, and Jio Asaka. But since they all said so, then I'll join them. Miss Asaka. Although this reason made people feel helpless, Black Rabbit was still very grateful. Wuming looked at the 3 problem children in surprise. Through these words, Wuming could see that the 3 problem children had also guessed the purpose of Black Rabbit inviting people from another world. But Wuming was not surprised. Anyone who was slightly smarter, after seeing Wuming beat around the bush and Black Rabbit's various actions, could more or less guess Black Rabbit's purpose. Therefore, Wuming was not surprised that the 3 of them guessed Black Rabbit's purpose. But Wuming was quite concerned about what they said. But thinking about it carefully, it was not strange for problem children to say such things. Everyone. Thank you so much. Black Rabbit's eyes were filled with tears as he bowed 90 degrees to Wuming and the other 3. Then, the 3 problem children did not let down their title of problem children. Wuming even suspected that this was the 3 problem children's tactic of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. It's too early to thank me. I just won't directly refuse to join. I didn't say that I would join. Black Rabbit looked at 16 Nights Reverse blankly. I just don't want to join a community that's too good. If it's a community that's slightly worse, maybe I'll join. Black Rabbit turned his head mechanically and looked at Jio Asaka. Even Miss Asaka, since the 2 of them are like this, then I'll be like them and tease Black Rabbit. Haruai Hiroyuki said the cruelest words without any expression. So, everyone is teasing Black Rabbit. Black Rabbit lowered his head. So it's like this. Wuming said lightly and shook his head helplessly. His conjecture was actually correct. Then, Black Rabbit took out a paper fan from nowhere and hit the problem children's heads hard. You adult problem children That's why, girl, you're still too young. How can you believe the words of problem children? Wuming smiled helplessly. Then, I say, I'm not teasing you. Black Rabbit, why did you hit my head? Wuming helplessly rubbed his head where Black Rabbit hit him. Because this topic was brought up by Mr. Villo. Black Rabbit can see that Mr. Villo is also an adult problem child. Black Rabbit puffed up his cheeks and said angrily. Good job. Times 2 Jio Asaka and Haruai Hiroyuki gave Wuming a good job gesture. This made Wuming feel his head hurt, although it didn't hurt. When Wu Ming thought about how he was classified as a problem child by Black Rabbit, he inexplicably felt a trace of sadness. "All right, little brother, you should know that we're in this together." 16 Nights put his arm around Wu Ming's shoulder and said generously, "Should I have left immediately after coming to this world? These 3 guys won't die from the fall anyway." Wu Ming was speechless. Wu Ming even started to suspect that these 3 guys didn't guess the situation of Black Rabbit's community through Wu Ming's beating around the bush and Black Rabbit's behavior, but purely to tease Black Rabbit. But of course, that was a joke. "Then, Black Rabbit, can you tell us why you invited us?" Jio Osaka finished speaking and straightened his body, looking quite serious. Not only Jio Osaka, but Haruai Hiroyuki and 16 Nights also became serious. "So you guessed it already." Wu Ming chuckled lightly and also began to get serious. Speaking of which, Wu Ming felt that he had been very serious all along. "You don't have to hide it, Black Rabbit. Compared to being tricked into a weak community, I think they're more willing to take the initiative to join a weak community." The 3 problem children nodded along with Wu Ming's words. Wu Ming's words became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Black Rabbit began to talk. "Actually, Black Rabbit's community is now a community that doesn't even have a name or a flag, which is the so-called no name.